Well, it's that special time of year again. The most wonderful time. Nothing makes me more festive than spooky season, and what better way to enjoy this time of year than with horror games and movies? And with a new Resident Evil game on the way, felt like an appropriate time to marathon the entire franchise. This is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, video game franchises of all time, but even still, there are some titles that even I haven't played, and many that I haven't played in years. So sit back, grab a cold brew and some Halloween snacks as we delve into the history of Resident Evil from start to present day. And as always, I will be focusing on console and portable console titles only. No collaborations or mobile stuff. Not that there really is a lot of mobile games, but just bear that in mind. Resident Evil, known as Biohazard in Japan, released in 1996. Now, I already did a video on this, a rather lengthy look back at the game and its ports, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. But if you haven't already, go check out that video first if you want a more detailed account of this game and its various ports. But yes, Resident Evil is the timeless horror masterpiece that truly redefined horror in gaming, as in one that isn't just horror in aesthetic, but actually tried to be scary. Originally born as a remake for the Famicom horror game Sweet Home, coincidentally released with Kiyoshi Kurosawa's film of the same name. And for a lot of people, this title was scary. Kids playing this in the 90s shat themselves for the first time they experienced this. The 90s was an interesting era for the horror genre. Japan was throwing out some zingers, more so on the psychological and paranormal side. So it is interesting that Japan, making Biohazard, decided to go the zombie route. Zombies still weren't a genre of their own by this point like they are today. You had the Undead Romero films and some other great entries. Zombies since have oversaturated film, and I don't believe it's a stretch to say that Resident Evil played a role in revitalizing that interest. Now, I've been terribly desensitized to horror since a young age, and truthfully, these games were never that scary to me, but I still love them for how they played homage to the genre and how they encapsulated perfectly all of the elements that I love. And okay, maybe the original isn't a full-on masterpiece, but it's pretty close. It may not be as cryptic as the original Zelda, but it doesn't hold your hand, and first-time players might struggle with the puzzles or navigation. That and, of course, the tank controls. I can't really say much here since tank controls have never been an issue for me. I think they're pretty straightforward, actually, but that does seem to be a struggle for many newcomers and deters them from trying out the originals, which is a damn shame. The game aged pretty well due to its pre-rendered backgrounds, which look even better on higher-end versions of the game such as PC or Sega Saturn. The gameplay consists of finding items and ammo, unlocking weapons and using them for tight combat. The loading screens cleverly are hidden with door opening animations meant to build up your suspense and anxiety of what could be in the next room. The dialogue is downright awful, and that's what makes it fun and iconic.
Yeah, so much for him. We got to the root of the problem.
What is it? It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things. Don't mention it. What a monster. I can't believe... What the hell is this place anyway?
The game had to be made on a tight budget as Capcom was facing bankruptcy. That definitely made cutting some corners.
Joseph!
As I said before, I've already made a video on this detailing the story and all the different versions and the routes, but I do want to reiterate that this game does not have a canon ending, and I will always find that pretty bizarre. And of course, keep in mind, they weren't really thinking of a sequel at the time, they were just trying to make a game on a wish, really. I can cut some slack in that department, but it gets weird that they didn't fix that in Remake. I can't tell you how many times I've revisited this mansion, and even with its flaws, the original Resident Evil is plain and simply iconic. But really, it's the starting point for the franchise that will bring in a lot of game changers. And that includes the direct sequel, Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is considered to be one of the best in the franchise, and is my personal favorite. I love the characters, the visual style, the setting, the gameplay enhancements. Hell, even the story is a little bit better this time. Resident Evil 2 is the Empire Strikes Back of the series. Shinji Mikami, director of the first game, was pushed to producer and hired Hideki Kamiya to direct this one. Kamiya would later go on to create Devil May Cry, as well as many other great games. There were a lot of internal differences and development issues with this game, arguments on the direction it should take, and ultimately the original sequel was scrapped. We now call this version 1.5. Some elements did carry on, such as Leon, but the female lead, Ezra Walker, was reworked into Claire Redfield, sister of Chris from the first game. The alternate scenarios have actually been reworked to be a cohesive single story, unlike the previous game, where you pick one character and the other is locked away and you have to save them. Here, both characters have a role to play. The canon route for this game is Claire A and Leon B, although this could be confusing when Leon's disc is generally considered disc 1. Well, we'll focus on the canonical run. Resident Evil 2 starts several months later, giving us some unfilled gaps. Where are the characters from 1? Instead, we have these two new characters. The manual of the original game gives some extra details, such as Leon being late because he got dumped by his girlfriend and had a hangover. Right off the bat, Leon is already struggling with alcohol. It actually makes a lot of sense for why he latches onto Ada so easily. Regardless, the scale of everything is much grander in the intro for this game. Now we're actually in Raccoon City, but Umbrella's experiments have overtaken the city, now full of zombies. The opening cinematic is 3D animated, giving us a definitely much better opening. It's less quirky and has its own feel. And the voice acting is much better. Allison Court as Claire, whose voice should be very familiar to 90s kids.
Hey you! Do you know how much that game costs?
Yeah, a quarter.
Leon is voiced by Paul Haddad, rest in peace, who gave us Leon's first voice and a damn good one. The character you choose determines the opening of the game. Both Leon and Claire have dedicated cutscenes that eventually link together. After her and Leon are separated, are thrown right into the city. This is a far more intense opening than the previous title. If you don't know your tank controls, this can be a real challenge.
Never got used to the tank controls, and with Resident Evil 2, I never passed the first screen.
You also get this cutscene with Kendo, who unfortunately is always destined to die. And I'll say his interactions with Claire are a little creepy.
But don't you worry, girlie. You'll be safe in here. I'm keeping a close eye on things.
If you get through the entire opening sequence without picking up any items, you unlock a secret zombie, Chicken Heart Brad from Stars. And while we'll see his fate in the third title, 2 already shows us that he's dead. Killing him gives you the secret key, which is the game's equivalent of the closet key, which you can use to get alternate outfits and extra weapons. The RPD serves as this game's mansion. This is the residence with the evil in it. Full of monsters, jump scares, and puzzles. Here as Claire, you'll run into a mysterious young girl, Sherry, and the ill-fated cop Marvin, the creepy, disgusting bastard Chief Irons. Honestly, being a cop working in the RPD must suck. The building was originally an art museum converted into a police station, with card suit keys for specific doors and jewel puzzles in case you need to take a piss. Yeah. In fact, there's no bathroom in this place. One of the coolest sections in the station is the Star's office, where you can see the desks of the RE1 characters, getting little details about them and the photo hidden in Wesker's desk. No doubt some incriminating evidence linking him to the evil, diabolical bioorganic weapons study. You can find Chris's diary, in which he states that he and Barry are going to investigate Umbrella in Europe, which kinda leads us to Code Veronica later. One of the big additions to the monster roster, of course, is the Lickers, which are zombies that have been infected far too long and turn into these dog-like, inside-out creatures with harpoon tongues. They're a pretty big pain in the ass to kill, but thankfully they're blind, so you can just walk around them. Each major character also has a side character that, like the previous title, have a playable section. For Claire, you have Sherry, which basically is dodge dogs and roaches. Ugh. Claire A is the canon route because this is where Sherry gets infected by old Willie. I'd also argue that Claire having more interactions with the Birkins and Leon dealing with Mr. X just makes more sense narratively. The sewers are arguably the worst part of the game, but to me they're just very linear. You got some unthreatening spiders and a big ol' alligator. And I love that no matter what version you play of the game, blowing up this alligator always causes some frame drops. The final act is in the lab, which when playing Claire, your job is to make a vaccine for Sherry. The lab has a neat design, but ultimately is a rather small and linear section as well, leading to quite a bit of backtracking. Ultimately ends on a final boss with Willie. This boss is the only reason I still have not gotten no damage in this game. Damn you, Willie. We get another well-constructed CG ending sequence, and bam, you make your save for the B run. The B scenario is the other half of the game, the other side of the story. On the B scenario, you can actually see the helicopter crash, which is really goofy. What I like about the two scenarios is that you aren't just playing the game over again. Grant you, some of the puzzles are identical, but there are different item placements and require different routing, as well as certain events done in A scenario that affect B scenario, such as closing these shutters from the zombies trying to get out the windows, or in the armory where you choose the side pack or the submachine gun. But one big thing about the B scenario is Mr. X. Mr. X is far less threatening in the original, but is by far the scariest part in your first playthrough. You walk through a door and then you hear his music playing, and you're just sitting there wondering, why is Mr. X's music playing? He's not too hard to take out though, and he gives you some good ammo pickups on his body. Yeah, start digging in that butt. I will say this about RE2, not once have I ever felt like I was pressed for ammo. This place is chock full of it. There's ammo damn near every corner. With Leon, you get a different route featuring Ada. Instead of dealing with the Birkin drama, we meet Ada Wong, at first mentioned as a password in RE1. They decided to make an entire character off of that and became perhaps the most famous face of Resident Evil next to Leon and Jill because of, well, gooners. Lewd aside, Ada is an awesome character, and her performance in RE2 gives me 90s Spider-Man Black Cat vibes, that silky, cool voice full of mystery.
Too bad.
Leon should have known better than to trust her right off the bat, but damn, my boy was down bad. Can't blame him. Ada's story involves finding this reporter Ben, getting a little bit more insight on Umbrella, and learning about the G virus. Now, while this may be the canonical route, it is a lot harder to believe Ada survives. If you're playing Leon A, she gets shot and falls down a pit, and probably has some kind of Batman grapnel device or something. But in the canon B scenario, she gets all kinds of messed up. Either way, she survives and shows some care for Leon, assisting in his final battle with Mr. X, or Claire if you're playing Claire B. Now things make a little bit more sense, huh? You got both sides of the story. The gang escapes and Sherry is cured. Except, Willie ain't done yet. Alright, now he is. Just kidding. We get the full ending cutscene in the B scenario, which shows the gang escaping Raccoon City and promising to continue their fight against Umbrella. And some badass credits roll.
Hey, it's up to us to take out Umbrella.
After completing all the scenarios, you unlock 4th Survivor and eventually Tofu Survivor, which are short play modes. 4th Survivor has you playing as Hunk, which is everyone's goddamn favorite character for some reason, I guess because of how mysterious he is. Resident Evil 2 is the perfect sequel. It takes everything that didn't work with the first game and made it work, and it also improved the things that did already work. Better locations, better art, better narrative, better sound design. The music is top tier. This is one of the best soundtracks of gaming. Probably the best soundtrack in Resident Evil, but I'm sure that can spark some arguments. It perfectly sets the atmosphere, blending horror and comfort, unsettling ambience that wraps around you like a warm blanket. And I mean, come on, RE2 save theme? Mwah. The enemies are more interesting here with better AI. Hell, their limbs can break apart when they grab you. They get aggroed and get a little bit faster, and the story is a lot more compelling, even if it is just basically aliens. None of these are to dock the OG, not by any means. That game, was made on a hope and a prayer. This is showing what can be done with those proper assets and budget and desire to be a great sequel. These are positives for both because a sequel should strive to be better. RE2 had its share of ports, although nothing quite as drastic as the first game, many of which just had general improvements, such as the Dreamcast, which added an extra difficulty. The DualShock version introduced Extreme Battle, which is like battle mode of the Sega Saturn for RE1. You have to go around and find these 4 virus bombs while fighting off different enemies in random locations. What's really cool about this is you can unlock characters like Ada and Chris to play. The N64 release is probably the most unique, as they were able to fit both discs into a single N64 cartridge. This does come with some sacrifices in quality and omissions, but overall it's a great port. It also includes extra files to connect with RE3 and the at the time in development Resident Evil 0. And there are some costumes exclusive to the N64 version. Oh, and then there is a randomizer mode, but it's whatever. Still, my favorite console release is probably the GameCube version, outside of having to use the GameCube D-pad, which is not great for tank controls. It's still my preferred choice for playing the game on our CRT. They got both discs into one, it looks great, plays great. Otherwise, the best way to experience the game is on PC, which can be enhanced like the first game with Seamless HD, and I think out of all the Seamless HD projects, this one's my favorite. After the success of Resident Evil 2, Capcom was fully prepared to make a set of new games. They had several creative teams working on different projects. Their next big game was ultimately canned in preparation for the new PlayStation 2. To keep fans from waiting, they started working on a side project for the OG PlayStation. The side project, however, would eventually evolve into being the third mainline title, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, or Last Escape in Japan. Code Veronica was also in development for the Dreamcast at the time, with the Redfields set to be the primary characters for that story. So this game was being developed with a new director, Kazuhiro Ayama, and a new writer, Yasuhisa Kawamura, who had little knowledge of the franchise prior. Since the Redfields were taken, they decided that Jill was the best character to bring back to lead this title. While Jill was already a memorable character, it was 3 that made her truly iconic.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
Jill is voiced by Catherine Disher, Jean Grey herself. Quite a lot of X-Men voice actors in these games, huh? This game takes place before Resident Evil 2, but ends after Leon, Claire, and Sherry escape, having the setting be in Raccoon City instead of a large building like the first 2 games. The map for most of this title is the streets of the city, which feel much more expansive than the opening of RE2. The developers put in a lot of nice additions and quality of life changes. For instance, you can now go up the stairs without having to use a button. You can simply walk up and down them, and zombies can also chase you on them. Oh, and the big one, there's Quick Turn. This is a real godsend. And of course, the big addition to match the new expansive maps is the title's big bad, Nimi. Aoyama wanted to give a new experience of horror to the player, and so we have our first true case of the stalker enemy. Nemesis is a big tank that will aggressively hunt you down. Nimi was inspired by the T-1000 from Terminator. So Resi 1 is Sweet Home / Living Dead, Resi 2 is Aliens, and Resi 3 is Terminator. Got it. There's a lot of RNG involved too, so keeps you on your toes, not knowing exactly when or where Nimi will pop up. His signature music and phrase are your warning. Nimi is not a slow lurker like Mr. X. This dude is fast, and it makes it a challenge to fight, which leads me to some other additions that this game brought in. 1. Gunpowder mixing, where you can craft your own ammo types depending on your playstyle or what you think would be more beneficial to go up against certain scenarios. And real-time choice selection. RE3 was a short game, so they beefed it up by having branching scenarios. Although the game has 2 variants in the ending, they ultimately go the same place. Through Jill Valentine, we witnessed the outbreak of the T-virus on the citizens of Raccoon and watched the downfall of the city. We were immediately thrown into the zombie-plagued streets. While it may feel rather large, it's nowhere near the labyrinth of Silent Hill. Still, the core of Resident Evil is here. We go somewhere, find something, put that in something else, go somewhere else, bada bing, bada boom. The graphics look a bit different, although the game is still rendered through the same engine. The zombies have more variety now, and we even get some different enemy types like the Drain Demos. These guys are disgusting. They're fleas that have been infected with the T-virus. We get to see how Brad dies. Damn, he didn't need to do all that, Nimmy. And your first Nemesis encounter gives you the option to battle him or not. If you beat him, you get some item pickups, or you could just run into the police station and save a little bit of time. Most of the first half of the title is running around the city, running into characters like Carlos and being chased by Nemesis. Carlos is certainly a character, a mercenary hired by Umbrella. Definitely shows off how badass Jill is compared to him. The puzzles in this game make you work a lot more than the previous two. The most infamous is probably the water puzzle towards the end of the game, but there's also RNG involved with many of these puzzles or room placements, meaning you can't just memorize one solution, you have to memorize many. You'll also run into Gravedigger, my personal arch nemesis of this title, as well as the traitor Nikolai. Things don't go well in the train leading us to the clock tower, perhaps the most memorable location in the game, with its architecture and level design, and of course, the music puzzle. And the first real, true battle with Nemesis, which can be cheese under rather specific conditions. Jill gets infected here and taken out for some time. This is when the events of RE2 happen, during which we get to play a Carlos section in the hospital and make a vaccine for Jill. At least Carlos has an assault rifle. Oh look, the hunters are back. And gamma hunters. Big old frogs. Once Jill is back in commission, we spend some time in the park with gamma hunters and worms. Blech. There's a cool sequence of zombies rising up from the ground in this graveyard, even though zombies aren't reanimated in this series. Nah, it looks awesome. We'll have our final confrontation with Gravedigger, and then as tradition, go to the final lab. The lab is a bit tricky to navigate, but not nearly as bad as backtracking in the second title. We'll battle Nimmy a couple times before blowing his ass away with the railgun. You don't even have to fire a single shot in the final boss battle for this game. You just run around and get him blasted. This sort of substitutes the traditional rocket launcher drop. And then Barry saves us! One of the two possible endings, and the best ending, because Barry!
I couldn't let you die.
Is it you?
Are you ready to finish this?
Oh, and Raccoon gets nuked, bringing an end to the Raccoon trilogy of Resident Evil, soon to be ushered into a new world of video game storytelling. The game certainly encourages you to replay it many times, as there are several epilogues to unlock. There's also a game mode called Mercenaries. Aha, there it is. A lot of people really love Merc mode. I think it's alright. Mercenaries is wild. You can choose from one of the Umbrella officers here, which Brian Irons has implanted a bomb in them, and you have to go around killing enemies for points while this timer is counting down. Again, I'm not too fond of this game mode, but a lot of people really love it. RE3 is a much shorter game than 2, but there's definitely an argument of it being the best of the trilogy. It brought in a lot of great ideas and gameplay enhancements. But for me personally, I still prefer 2 a bit more. I'm just more intrigued with the characters and the storytelling in that one. But all of these games are legendary status. While Code Veronica should have been the next title, PlayStation decided to squeeze out one more project before that could happen. Resident Evil Survivor, our first spin-off title. Also, the first first-person Resident Evil game as a light gun shooter. And people don't really like this one because it's not great. And really, this sits between Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica, so can't blame them. The title follows a man with amnesia waking up after a helicopter crash at this Umbrella facility in some town called Sheena. This takes place after Raccoon already got nuked. The opening cutscene is comically bad and a drastic downgrade from all the improvements we've seen in the previous titles.
You're not going to get away.
Gameplay wise, it's very much classic Resident Evil in first person. Still with tank controls, and you even use the same combat button command to bring up your weapon. You default to a handgun with infinite ammo. The mapping is much more linear. You go around, find keys, and open doors with them pretty much right next to where you found them. There are branching paths available though. I suppose since this is such a short game, they wanted to add a little variety. I will say that the loading times in this game suck. It takes much longer to get into a room than the previous titles, and considering that we're moving forward to a new gen, yeah, this already feels outdated for the time. The movement itself isn't too bad actually, it feels decent enough moving in first person. You can use the L1 button to quick turn to important items or enemies in the room, although it may not always go where you want it to. You can still find files like Classic Resi for some lore, whatever that means for this game, as well as weapon pickups. The game seems generous on health too, as I've taken a lot of hits without having to heal yet. We are soon given a name to our character, Vincent, who is blamed for letting the T-Virus unleash on this island. While at a hospital, we run into Mr. X. Ah, shit! Well, went down pretty easy.
No, this is me. I am Vincent. It was all my fault.
Boy, the voice acting sure is something else in this one, huh? We run into a lot more Mr. X's into a nightclub. I guess we're killing their vibes here.
Vincent? It's me, your mother.
My mother?
Oh boy. We run into two British kids, I think, whose parents work for Umbrella. They've been brainwashed into thinking that Umbrella were the good guys, making them distrustful of Vincent. We eventually go to their house where the sister tells us that the brother ran off to the Umbrella lab. Going through some of the mines and getting gangbanged by hunters, we finally reach the lab. This is by far the smallest lab, ironically with the most backtracking. We save the brother, who gives us a hefty exposition dump, and we learn that we aren't actually Vincent, but rather Ark Thompson, who was investigating Vincent being sent by his buddy Leon. Turns out this Vincent guy is a real asshat. He was experimenting on teenagers, slicing their brains open with no anesthetic to develop a super tyrant, Hypnos. Oh yeah, this place is a tyrant facility, that's why there's so many of them here. Most of the game has been familiar enemies, but we do get some new guys, like the Undertakers. They're like bioweapon soldiers and assholes. The final boss ends up being against the Hypnos tyrants, which technically has 3 stages. The first one you can just burn his toes, but the second and third take a little bit more maneuvering. Overall, it's not too bad. Then of course we get to the lab explosion and Ark leaves, saving the kids in the process. Good job, Ark. I wonder when we'll see you again.
We can fly as long as we have fuel.
Aw damn, they gonna crash into the sea. Survivor is a pretty notorious game in the franchise. Not many like it. I think it's okay. It's definitely the weakest of the PlayStation 1 games, and I don't think anyone is gonna argue with that. It just doesn't really do much for the franchise. It's innovative with its first-person light gun mechanics, and it does add some pretty crazy lore. The music's not too bad either, I must say. Generally, you could skip this one unless you're just really interested or just love this era for the franchise. But it's time to move on to one of the better entries. Resident Evil Code Veronica is one of the most fascinating and beloved entries in the series, and still gets hefty demands from the fanbase for a remake. CV stands between eras of classic Resi and modern Resi, with its new fancy graphics engine and real-time backgrounds, but still plays with tank controls and sort of fixed camera. Development began back in 1998, as I briefly mentioned, stemming from failed attempt of porting Re2 on the Sega Saturn. And such, Mikami began developing something original for the Sega audience. Mikami himself stated that this game deserved to be called Resident Evil 3 more than Nemesis. This title was released for the Dreamcast, which unfortunately wasn't a console that did super well. The entire aesthetic of this game is completely shifted from what we saw in the original trilogy. The whole Euro horror aesthetic works with the storyline as well, considering its villain and its focus on bloodlines. And such, the game takes a little step back from the action approach of 3, it goes a little bit more into horror. Well, there's still a lot of action in this. The opening sequence is straight up John Woo. But there's a lot of lurking horror to this game. Eventually, this title did release in 2000 after several delays, but ultimately wasn't the complete game. There was a lot of stuff that Mikami still felt needed to be incorporated or wasn't finished in time. And so, only a year later, we got Code Veronica X, which is the version we will be focusing on, because it really is the true vision of the game. X added in 9 minutes of extra cutscenes, particularly focused on the return of Wesker. There was quite a bit of in-game stuff tweaked as well, such as the final boss and Steve's hair, which looks more like Leonardo DiCaprio in the original. Code Veronica X was released on PS2 originally, but was later ported to GameCube. With this game, I'm used to the PS2 version. It's the one I had and the one that they put on PS4, PS5. Over time, the GameCube has become my favorite with its slightly better graphics and controller scheme. But for this video, I decided to try something different. To play the game in a way I never had before, the HD remaster. It's essentially the same thing as Code Veronica X, but natively upscaled to 16:9 with quite a bit of graphical changes. The biggest thing was the lighting, which is vastly different. It's much more immersive and dynamic, with appropriate light sources giving a more realistic and stylized look. But the contrast is a bit heavy, all of which was done with the MT Framework engine. The biggest downside is that this is only available on PS3 and Xbox 360. With 360, you can play it via backwards compatibility, but that's all it is. I went ahead and got it for the PS3 though, since that console does have one of the largest libraries of Resident Evil titles, and this was one of the few ones I didn't have. That really was the beast of a system to have if you were a Resi fan. Oh, and another downside is there's no alternate controller schemes. You're stuck with one setup. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but it's just really inconvenient. All in all, I was excited to finally try this version out. The story of CV takes place 3 months after Raccoon got nuked, setting us early 1999, which has been enough time for Claire to turn into a super badass action star. Well, she already handled herself pretty well too, so makes sense. This entire opening sequence is devoid of any horror whatsoever. It does, however, show tremendous graphical improvements. Tightly choreographed and good camera work here. Yeah, this is the most cinematic piece yet. Claire is still captured and sent to Rockford Island out in the South Pacific. There's an Umbrella concentration camp, Jesus Christ, which is attacked. The remaining survivors escaped, and the injured officer lets Claire go because he's just had enough of this.
Perfect.
As stated before, this is still a tank-controlled game, but not with the traditional fixed cameras. They actually do their part to help you out here. It doesn't take long for the game to throw zombies at us either. I guess it's as good a time as any to say that zombies are weird in this game, all part of the not-so-great development side. Zombie grabs are really bizarre. Your best bet for dodging zombies is actually running really close to them or even into them. I don't know if it's because there are hitboxes on their hands, but if you try to run away from them, they have a greater chance of grabbing you. But the game does let you push them off pretty fast before they can get a bite in, and that's really handy. Claire runs into another surviving prisoner, Steve Burnside, a 90s anxiety teenage shithead who you might grow a soft spot for as the game goes on.
Sorry about that little misunderstanding.
Don't worry about it. The director's cut decided to replace Steve's Leonardo DiCaprio hair with basically what my hair was in high school. Thanks. We're then blessed with our first weapon, the handgun, which we end up having way too much ammo for. I gotta say, for a game described as one of the most difficult in the franchise, they give you a lot of resources.
You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
Wah, wah, wah. The prison section is the first part of the game, which isn't very long. They incorporated this metal detector part that's actually a little neat. Fun fact, you can prevent zombies from breaking through by purposely dropping the shutters before their trigger. Surprisingly, there's no item box around until you finish the prison section. For first-time players, this can be really frustrating. After all, you don't have much inventory space at the start, and you don't know what all you need right now. It's not until you reach the palace or residence or whatever this is, you get to the first save room. Pretty much the first disc or the first half of the game is spent going back and forth in this palace and the prison. This game is the supreme backtracking Resident Evil title. I can't think of any game that makes you go back and forth as much as this one. But I guess it makes learning the routes a bit easier. This is one of the harder games to memorize, also because it's over 3 hours long for an A rank. You go to the palace, solve some puzzles, save Steve. This is single-handedly the greatest frame of the entire franchise. There you meet Alfred Ashford. The Ashford family has deep connections with Spencer and in founding Umbrella with their discovery of the progenitor virus. Basically what led to all the evil experiments by Umbrella. Now it wouldn't really be your horror without some focus on lineage and yeah, I'm not gonna touch that one. So Alfred is the current head of the Ashfords and also is batshit insane. He has a twin sister, Alexia, and they were test tube babies together. Although Alexia is MIA, and Alfred pulls a Norman Bates, but with his sister instead of his mother. This leads to investigating the twins' home, which is another castle behind the mansion. Okay. The enemies for the most part have been fan favorites, your zombies, your Doberman, but now we got a new type, the Bandersnatches. These guys suck. They got big old stretchy arms with a stupid hitbox. At least they aren't too hard to kill, but they're annoying as hell. Later down the line, we'll see these axolotls return to the hunters and hunter-type enemies called sweepers that can poison you. Eventually, we have to go all the way back to the prison for more puzzles and unlocked sections, as well as giving Rodrigo medicine to secure the S rank, or A rank in the US, and to get the lockpick. On the way back to the palace,
greetings.
I love that stupid introduction. Greetings. Turns out Wesker was behind the attack in Rockford.
I despise Chris.
Yeah, I guess because of this.
Chris? Stop it.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
This is the title where we get to see that Wesker has Matrix powers, which is how people will forever come to remember the character leading up to the, well, 7 minutes. Steve and Claire then make their escape from the island, including a tyrant boss, because why not? But their freedom is limited as their plane crashes in Antarctica. And that's where Disc 1 ends. Disc 2 opens with Claire in the Antarctic Umbrella base, where Alexia did a lot of her stuff and froze herself Walt Disney style. Claire wounds Alfred and then battles the most dangerous boss in the game, one of the most deadly in the franchise. I say that because Nosferatu here can kill you in one shot, from full health, in a few different ways. No safety rails here, and it's snowing so hard you can't see shit. You are given a sniper rifle, which really only exists for this boss fight. It's tricky, but effective. Then the story finally shifts to Chris Redfield, and I love his triumphant cutscene.
Don't worry, Claire. I'm coming to save you.
And we're back at this goddamn island. Well, we fight the Dune Worm, which ultimately kills Rodrigo no matter how many times you try to save the guy. And then more backtracking, and the most intense backtracking. Most of the place is damaged, so there's limited space to explore, and it's really just going back and forth here. We do see Chris reunite with Wesker. That's cool. And after all of that, Chris makes it to the Antarctic as well, where we save Claire, and also run into this residence place that looks very, very similar to Spencer Mansion. There are a lot of callbacks to the original game in this title. Mikami was heavily involved with this one and wanted it to be a more complete experience than the original game. Get to play Claire for a little bit more, just to see Steve die, and it is a little tragic, I suppose. Chris wraps up the game by setting up the self-destruct as usual and battling the final boss, Alexia thing. Then there's a very lengthy cutscene at the end showing Chris and Wesker face off, although the siblings do get to escape by chance and Wesker makes a promise of the next battle. Code Veronica is such a strange entry. For many Resi fans, this was an introductory title for them. And it's one of the longer titles, which is a plus for a lot of people who want longer games for their money. Really, the 2 discs do feel like 2 full games, especially for first playthroughs. But my god, this game has its flaws. Soft locking, enemy AI, really the level design. They took quite a bit away with this one too. Even something like going up the stairs, which was automatic in 3, went back to requiring a button command. The zombies no longer have dismemberment, and they even made the decap sound effect, but nothing actually happens. People mistakenly think that this game is the most difficult intentionally, but it's really because of its flawed design. It's not a bad game, but I'll never consider it the holy grail of the franchise either. Frankly, I don't really think I like this one more than the original trilogy either. But overall, yes, Code Veronica is cool, and it should be played like all the other mainline titles. And after the main story, you unlock battle games similar to previous titles. This is a mode where you had to clear several different rooms with playable characters from the game, and Wesker. It's not too difficult as you basically have unlimited ammo, although Wesker does only have a knife. What a badass. You can choose from third and first person, which is pretty wild, and Claire does get a special outfit that I wish was in the main game. The next title is one I've never played and one of the rare entries to not hit North America. Resident Evil Survivor 2. Yeah, even Survivor got a sequel. Code Veronica. Huh. Yeah, this was an arcade game that got ported to PS2, a light gun shooter based on Code Veronica. I never played this one before, so let's try it out. I'll be playing the EU version. The game opens with an intro sequence for Claire and Steve, although the loading times kinda kill the flow of it. This title seems to reuse the same engine of the original Code Veronica, so it looks good. There's no voice acting though, that sucks. While this may share the name Survivor, the only thing common between the two is the first person aspect. It's definitely much more arcade style. You pick up weapons, you shoot zombies, and you follow the arrows. Also, time until Nemesis is loose. Nemesis? They even threw liquors in here too. Combining different enemies from throughout the series. The core gameplay is simple. Explore areas from Code Veronica, find a key, open door with said key, and then boss battle. Oh! There's Nimmy! What the hell Nosferatu doing here? We aren't even out in the Antarctic. The game does end in a boss fight with Alexia, although we're still on Rockfort. It takes about half an hour to beat this game. There is an extra mode, basically battle game, called Dungeon Mode. You go around waves of enemies, but in unique locations like Clock Tower. I have not a lot to say about this. Survivor 2 is a fun arcade game, but that's really all there is to it, and I cannot imagine spending $200 on a game you beat in 30 minutes. Personally. Actually, I prefer playing this thing on an actual arcade cabinet over the console port. It's competent and maybe even fun if you like these types of arcade games, but I can't really say that there's anything special about it. It's simple point-and-shoot arcade coded in Code Veronica paint. The next entry, however, is perhaps the strangest of all, Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy Color. Well, I said back in the RE1 video, they had been trying to get these games on Game Boy and handheld since the OG. And, well, here we have an original title for Game Boy Color. And this one is also pretty notorious for not being great. I tried playing it years ago, but never got that far. I'm ready to give it another shot, though. Well, right off the bat, the soundtrack for this game goes hard. It should be noted that the narrative of this game is not canon. That said, they went pretty detailed on the storytelling for this title. Full with visual novel-style animated cutscenes. So the story goes, the heroes of the previous games form their own unit dedicated to fighting Umbrella. Leon goes missing on this cruise ship, bringing back the unused yacht idea from before. Well, we finally get to play Barry Burton in his search for Leon. Barry! Oh. This is Barry's debut gameplay. I'll admit, I didn't want to play this at first, but hear me out. This game is kind of fun, actually. But damn, if this weren't $300, I'd say go for it. The gameplay is in top view with pretty fluent movement. You go around searching every nook and cranny for ammo and herbs as well as story important items. And then there's zombies. The combat in this, you have to time your attacks with the slider here. These are actually kind of fun, but the enemy attacks do way too much damage. I learned way too late that you can actually aim and attack zombies ahead of time before they reach you. You can actually attack them before having their attention. That's pretty impressive. Okay, the game does get pretty strenuous as you play along. The resources are not in your favor here, and after a while I stopped seeing handgun ammo altogether. I guess the RNG gods were against me here. And it wouldn't be so bad if you could avoid zombies, but you really can't. They are very much magnetized towards you. In Resident Evil, you have to know which battles to fight and when to conserve ammo. You don't exactly have that luxury here, as you're much more likely to get thrown into a fight. And even if you do escape combat, they still attack you during the animation. And for God's sake, they can hurt you after you kill them. There's also these tyrant bosses, which aren't too hard as long as you got ammo and aren't low on health. Halfway through the game, HQ warns us that there's a BOW we're looking for that has green blood. Spoilers, it's Leon! Yeah, turns out Leon died and now he got body snatchered? Whatever, this isn't canon. Gaiden was surprisingly more enjoyable than I expected, but it's still not great. I think back in the day I would have really loved this, but playing it now, There's not really a whole lot to say. The RNGs suck, the enemies suck, and it's so simplistic. They make your resources absolute dog ass to make up for how easy the game would be. It's a cool side story and a what if story, so if you want to check it out, go ahead, but it's not necessary. Oh boy, here we go. 2002. This was a huge year for Resident Evil. We got 2 major games and the first film adaptation. This isn't a video about the movies though, we pretty much all know that they suck ass, although the assery varies in different layers, which is a whole different video on its own. We finally saw the release of Resident Evil 0, which had been in development since the N64. A prequel set before the events of RE1, seeing Bravo Team and Rebecca Chambers and how they ended up in the Spencer Mansion. This game isn't my favorite. It's definitely a mixed bag for a lot of players, and it certainly falls in the shadow of the much more superior RE1 remake that released the same year. Both games run on the same engine, giving them identical looks and gameplay, minus the partner switching and item box stuff, also making 0 a prequel for remake and not so much RE1, but it doesn't really matter because the story in this game frankly doesn't make a lot of sense. Although with Resident Evil, that doesn't mean much. They try to further connect with the game that inspired Resident Evil, Sweet Home. In doing so, they got rid of item boxes. Yeah, thanks. Now you have to drop your shit on the floor and go back and pick it up when you need it later. There's also a party system of 2 characters. We have Rebecca Chambers from Resident Evil 1, who hasn't been seen since then, and a new character, Billy. This is his one and done title, and I don't know why people keep asking for him when he is one of the most boring goddamn characters in this series. Billy is a former Marine recon officer set to be executed on account of 23 murders. The game opens about a day before the mansion incident, where a train for Umbrella is attacked by leeches, and a singing opera leech. That's our villain. So, Stars Bravo is investigating the murders of Raccoon, like they're supposed to be, and then there's the train incident. Billy is also on the loose. Boy, that sure is a lot of variables, isn't it? Like Code Veronica brought in the Ashfords, this title focuses on the Marcuses.
Robert, I have become the Queen Leech. It was I who scattered the T-virus in the mansion. Revenge. On Umbrella. Welcome to Raccoon City, bitch S. Albert Wesker is a punk-ass bitch. Suck my leech asshole, Billy.
James was one of the co-founders and lead developers of the T-virus, but he went a little rogue and Umbrella took him out, and I don't mean to a nice dinner. The villain is Queen Leech, Marcus experiments that merged with his corpse and DNA and becoming Super BOW Leech Marcus. And the game tells us that Queen Leech is the one that released the T-virus in Arkley. Isn't that great? Because a simple screw up in the lab, that's just not enough. No. We need to have it into this convoluted mess. The story of Resident Evil already isn't great, but this just makes it worse. And really, I never thought Resi needed a prequel. It started where the story needed to. Unless the prequel maybe went further back to the Spencer days. But hours before the main game? What's the point? Here you control 2 players, Billy and Rebecca, on a single controller. The AI isn't too bad on your partner, it's actually rather smart at times. You can equip them with weapons to attack for you. Lots of puzzles require the characters to be separated and using each other's strengths in certain locations. Rebecca can mix chemicals, and Billy has a lighter. And he can also push stuff that Rebecca is not strong enough to move. Oh, and he can play piano. Rebecca and Billy find themselves trapped in Wesker and Birkin's attempt of cleaning up this whole situation. This includes the train section, which is oddly the most iconic for being the shortest part of the game. The claustrophobic setting of the train has a lot of potential, but it's also incredibly linear. Well, there's a giant scorpion here, for some reason. You can just poke him to death. The train crashes at Marcus's training facility. While Billy and Rebecca are going around fighting for their life and solving puzzles, Wesker decides now is the best time for him to quit Umbrella and start up his rival company, or link up with it, whatever. The duo eventually escape the facility and move on to the second disc of the game, fight a giant bat in a church, Rebecca eventually makes her way to the cable car in the lab from Resident Evil 2. Okay, well, the bright side here is that this is the closest we'll ever get to seeing what Resident Evil 2 Remake could have looked like on the GameCube era. One can dream. Rebecca runs into Enrico and he tells her about the mansion in RE1. This cutscene is so funny.
Just be careful.
I never saw him again.
Rebecca also battles a whole proto-tyrant on her own. On her own. It really makes it seem like they nerfed her in Remake after that. She did so exclusively by shooting his ass cheeks too. Eventually, the duo battle the Leech Queen, killing it with sunlight. Billy also drops the first shit in Resident Evil, I believe.
Shit!
And here, Billy and Rebecca part ways. Did Billy ever make it out of these woods? Who knows? We'll never see him again. Maybe he died out there. And after beating the main game, you unlock Leech Hunter mode, which is exactly as it advertises. You go around the training facility with Rebecca and Billy looking for leeches. The HD remaster is the ideal way to play this game, often bundled together with Remake. Not only does it support native 16:9, but it uses the original character models that actually were downscaled for the GameCube release, showing off how good they were supposed to look. They also added a new game mode called Wesker mode. Yeah, dead ass. Look at that, you get a Wesker-controlled Rebecca RE5 fashion. And he's got his own unique superpowers here too. The HD version also included a bunch of costumes that for some reason are paid DLC. Rebecca has a great catalog of outfits from other titles, and Billy has other Capcom fits. What a pair these two make. Zero isn't my favorite, but I do think that it is overhated. There's still a lot of classic Resi charm to be found here, even if the game is chock full of development problems. I don't revisit this one a lot personally. The story just doesn't grip me, nor does the environment, and it's just not a game I really bothered to master even when I love this particular era of Resident Evil. That said, the next game, Resident Evil 1 Remake. What can I say that hasn't already been said? This is my favorite Resident Evil. RE2 is probably my favorite video game ever made, right there with DMC3. But within the Resident Evil franchise, this is my favorite. This is the game that I speedrun. I've put an ungodly amount of hours in across multiple systems. And I did talk about this a little bit in the other Resi video, not as much as the other games, but again, what more can I say for this? Shinji Mikami came back into the director's chair with this one, and with a development just a little over a year, gave us perfection. They took the original game and built it from the ground up using a new engine and the GameCube's higher end capabilities. The game has a complete remodel with CGI cutscenes instead of live action one, more detailed character models, still using pre-rendered backgrounds, but they look a million times better and have held up against the test of time. Proven by the fact that this game came out in 2002 and still looks phenomenal on modern systems. Hell, this is one of the best looking video games. While the setting may be familiar, they made sure that this is not just the same game. Puzzles are reinvented, extra locations, extra lore. The score is one of the best. Areas in the original that weren't really much are now much grander, such as the shark room, which was originally just a square you walked around without the sharks being any threat. Here you got a whole water flooding puzzle, and Neptune's kind of a boss. You've got Lisa Trevor, one of the most tragic characters in Resident Evil lore, which also further connects to the origins of the mansion and the Trevors, how George Trevor built the place, and how Spencer screwed him and his family over very, very awfully. The controls are so much more improved, especially in HD remaster. The analog stick now actually has a purpose, and you can alternate between D-pad and analog for having true mastery of this game's movement. The story is essentially the same. You choose between Chris or Jill, both of which have been vastly redesigned with real models for their faces, such as Julia Voth as Jill, which is the most iconic face model for Jill. The opening cutscene is far more detailed, giving us more insight on Raccoon's reaction and a much more tense and dramatic prelude. And then the characters are split up just like the original. When playing Chris, Barry has gone missing. You get separated from the others and have to make your way through the mansion, where you meet Rebecca, and you know the story. You solve puzzles, you fight some giant critters, eventually you get to Wesker and fight the tyrant. Jill, much like the original, is looking for Chris alongside Barry, which offers many different branching paths and alternate cutscenes. Although the weird thing about this title is that it kept all the different endings, good, bad, and best. But there is still not a canonical ending where all the characters survive. That's the one thing I feel like that they really should have changed in this, and I know that they wanted to be as close to the original as possible, but given that this is a series now, with lore and continuity and all that, I think fans would have been fine if they worked on that just a little bit to have all the characters survive. Maybe just throw Barry in the cell with Jill, I don't know. Throw Rebecca in the cell with Chris. It could be something that simple at the very end. Well, gameplay-wise, this game is mad addicting. There is so much to explore and tweak on your routing, and I truly think it is the most fun to speedrun. There's loads of game modes to unlock, from invisible enemies, a real survivor, loads of costumes. And on the topic of, does this game need another remake? No, it doesn't need one. However, there are lots of people out there that think that tank controls and fixed cameras are outdated, skill issue. But I can't help but imagine that going over the shoulder style, modern remake style with the original game is going to make it feel much smaller. It happened with Resident Evil 2 remake, and I haven't got there yet, so I'll talk more about that when we get to that game. But when you get that change of perspective, it makes the whole experience feel smaller than it should. The idea of doing the original game in that style is gonna feel incredibly small. It goes without saying that if they do another remake, it should be Code Veronica. This game is a master of atmosphere, visual style, sound design, survival horror. It is one of the best games ever. On the contrary, this next title, I don't know anything about outside of the main characters in it. Resident Evil Dead Aim. This is the final installment of the Survivor Light Gun series. This, like the first Survivor, is an original story featuring new characters within the re-continuity. Here we have Bruce McGivern, who is sent to an Umbrella ocean liner called Spencer Rain. Here we are, on a boat again. We've got a nice cutscene here showing Bruce and the game's villain Sephiroth. I mean, Morpheus. Now, something very unique about this game, and I'm sure you may have noticed, it's actually over the shoulder, kinda. Still tank controlled, but yeah, we don't have to worry about those fixed cameras here, nor is this game entirely in first person either, only when you go to shoot enemies. It does feel pretty clunky on a controller though. Mind you, you are supposed to be using one of those Namco gun controllers. I don't have one of those. You could also use a mouse on the PS2 version as long as it's compatible. Unfortunately, I couldn't get mouse injector to work, so I'm stuck using the old PS2 controller. Still, the shooting mechanics are the most fun I've had with any of the Survivor games to this point, even with the PS2 controller. I don't think it's any stretch to say that this is the most fun of the Survivor games. On the cruise, we run into the poster girl of the title, Fong Ling. Well, here's your great value Leon and Ada pairing. The save theme for this game is also really nice. The first chunk of the game is on a boat, which isn't a super large map. You alternate between Bruce and Fong Ling, who grow a sort of cute dynamic together, with this running Donghua joke.
Wait, before you said Donghua, what does that mean?
It means you are cool.
Morpheus turns into whatever that is, and we kill a bunch of zombies and a tyrant. Really just is an upgraded version of Gaiden, huh? The boat gets titanic and we end up in this underwater area. We run into a lot of aquatic enemies like these tadpoles and frogs.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
We got Chungus over here, who after you shoot his head, you can actually see his brain dangling. I love that. Then there's this hornet, I guess, that you can spam with grenades. The final boss is against Morpheus, and they're definitely trying to serve with that walk, aren't they? Oh. Well, that wasn't so bad. Then we blow up the installation, fighting Morpheus a couple times after that, and saving Fong Ling. Bruce and Fongling survive in a yellow submarine.
Don Gua, I'm truly an idiot after all.
You know what it really means?
I've been in your country once.
That was not in your dossier.
This ending cutscene is rather adorable. Yeah, Dead Aim is actually really cool. Now I understand why so many people like the spin-off. It's really short, but it still feels like a more complete package than the other Survivor titles. This feels like an actual spin-off worth playing. The story is whatever, but the characters are fun and the gameplay is... It's hard for me to accurately rate it when I don't have the damn gun controller, but it wasn't too awful with analog. In my opinion, Dead Aim is one worth having in your collection. We've still got some spin-offs before the next mainline game, however. Resident Evil 4 is still in heavy development. Next up is Resident Evil Outbreak. This game is actually really important right now thanks to the upcoming Resident Evil 9, following the daughter of one of the playable characters from this title, Alyssa Ashcroft. So this title brings us back to Raccoon City on the night of the outbreak. We have a wide cast of characters here from different walks of life that are linked together under the premise of survival. The big gimmick for this game was multiplayer. Not couch co-op, sadly, but online multiplayer, which on consoles was still very much in its infancy. One of the big criticisms this game faced was its lack of voice chat. Yeah, no damn voice chat for a cooperative survival horror game? I would love to experience the game this way, but we're stuck playing this one solo for now. Although, until you play the game for a bit, you're stuck with NPCs, which the AI is actually pretty good, and playing with AI partners does earn more of the story. The game is told between 5 different scenarios. The first is the opening of the outbreak. Your character and a selection of partners have to escape a bar and reach the evacuation of the city. The game is classic tank controlled, although much more refined. You go around picking up items with real-time inventory, meaning you don't get to pause the game when checking your items. You only get 4 slots since items are shared with the AI, though it can be pretty tedious. Depending on your difficulty determines item locations as well as enemies. Some enemies might swap out for harder ones playing on higher difficulties. You are encouraged to play each scenario with different characters to get the full experience. There's also this ad-lib button, which is absurdly annoying and entertaining. You can go from greetings to complimenting your teammates' asses. The game doesn't have the traditional door animations, but you still have to sit through loading screens as you transition rooms, and some of these are very annoyingly long. Still, it plays a lot like classic Resident Evil, with going around pushing stuff and shooting stuff and picking up stuff. There's a lot of new features like melee attacks. Characters have a tackle as well as a unique move. There's also this infection timer, which increases unless you halt it with some antivirus. Pretty much a slow timer within the game, and truthfully, I've never had to worry about this hitting 100. Hell, I don't think I've ever actually seen it go above 50 in a normal playthrough. After the gang escapes, they end up in an underground facility. How? Who cares? They're there now. There is some canon within the scenarios, according to the wiki at least, in terms of which characters are the best to use story-wise. As we explore, we'll find out that this is the lab from Resident Evil 2. Yep, that's familiar. We spent some time in the frozen lab. I chose to play Yoko for this one as it felt like that made the most narrative sense. Although if you play someone else, Yoko apparently turns into a zombie. The order of events changes depending on which character you choose, but ultimately it results in getting the turntable moving from RE2, which results in a boss fight with a G mutant that, Monica spat out. The G mutant boss isn't too tough as long as he doesn't stun lock you. Otherwise, you can just smack his ass with this train. The third scenario has you in a hospital against leechmen. It's the smallest level in the game and my first S rank on time. You can distract the leeches with blood, which is a really cool mechanic, as well as incinerating the leech man. But other than that, yeah. The second to last story is a bit more fun.
Hey! Hey you! Huh? What? No shit.
You're trapped in a burning building full of zombies and lickers, including a boss with that thing. The final scenario is by far the longest and most investing. The gang goes to Raccoon University, I guess is the game's mansion equivalent. Spend some time here doing jewel puzzles and getting the power back on for the elevator, and then the game branches, giving you different routes you can take for your ultimate escape. I did the water treatment path, which included a lot of going back and forth, and fighting some gamma hunters. The game concludes with a timer setting off an explosion, as is tradition, and then battling a tyrant. And then we see the end of Raccoon, again. Outbreak is one of the most interesting entries in this series. If you consider all of the completion requirements for this title, it's easily one of the most time-consuming to play. You have to go through each scenario with each character on different difficulties, all of which have their own lists of completion. And there's lots of collectibles here to get as well, with points that you earn from those completions, alternate costumes, and gallery stuff. One of the big reasons that this game was delayed for so long was because while Capcom was interested in the new world of network console gaming, they felt that being in multiplayer took away the scary aspect of the series. Being forced to play by yourself is significantly more scary than playing with others, which is true. But I imagine still playing this game in its heyday would have been the best way to experience it. This is our first online Resident Evil game, and I definitely see it being more ahead of its time than looking at its flaws. I would recommend throwing at least this spin-off in for a marathon of mainline titles in preparation for 9. Outbreak was actually continued with a sequel/expansion, Outbreak File 2. File 2 in spirit is, well, extra stories for Outbreak, but there are lots of gameplay changes that make this one feel better, and an argument for it being the superior version. In essence, it's the same idea as the previous title. The game isn't much different in visual style, but it's only been a year. The menu and UI all look the same, all your favorite characters return, but for some reason, they've been completely recasted. Yeah, that's not jarring at all. Also, for the North American release, they removed the ad-lib button. Okay, well, I did personally find that feature very annoying, but a lot of people loved it, and it's really weird that they removed it just from the North American release. There are 4 scenarios to choose from the start, and you can pick your partners this time instead of having set ones. The first has us in Raccoon Zoo. Oh, that sounds like fun. Oh, this stage is really interesting because there's not really a lot of zombies, only at the beginning. The enemies in this stage are primarily zoo animals infected with the T-virus. That includes a giant-ass elephant, as well as hyenas, which are not much more dangerous than the Doberman, poisonous bees, and big old kitties, including the final boss with the biggest old kitty. I actually really liked this stage and its layout. It was a nice day out in Raccoon Zoo, although disappointingly, no raccoons. The second scenario brings us under Raccoon City with the subway network. This stage is pleasantly claustrophobic, with its tight hallways and this overall sense of being deep within the earth. Lots of zombos here to get in your way while basically just trying to get the power back on and get the train moving. And then we had to battle giant fleas before making our escape. This was the shortest scenario in the game, although the following is the most bizarre, where this totally not creepy old guy leads us through this maze in the woods into a hospital. A hospital with a giant plant monster. And plant monster zombies. Is this where The Last of Us got it from? All the while, you're being chased by this dude with an axe. Turns out the Axeman is the old man, Albert, who turned his wife dying of cancer into a plant with some illegal umbrella experiments. Well, that's rather depressing. And I enjoyed the stage quite a bit. It was actually the most tense that I felt out of both games. The next one, however, may be my favorite of both games. This scenario had us playing at the RPD, rebuilt completely for this game's engine. Any fan of RE2 will feel right at home with this map. All your favorite locations are here. We get to see what happened in the RPD and how it fell during the outbreak. Marvin and a band of cops try to help survivors evacuate the damned city. We also witness how Marvin meets his eventual tragic end. Marvin essentially sacrifices himself to help the survivors escape, or survivor in my case, showcasing Marvin to be a true badass. When all 4 previous scenarios are finished, you unlock the final one, which of course has us in an Umbrella lab, helping some Umbrella scientists out. Lots of going back and forth until we meet a friendly Mr. X, who shows us around and gives us a hand. He's not friendly. He's not friendly.
I think that may be a live one. Well, fuck it.
Did Kakashi just drop the first F-bomb in Resident Evil? And we conclude with a much more detailed look at the sterilizing of Raccoon City. Each character gets their own little epilogue too. Yeah, File 2 is superior to its predecessor in nearly every aspect. In terms of scenarios, I see both games as one complete package. But what makes Outbreak 2 superior are all those nice little quality of life changes and gameplay enhancements that just make this one feel a lot better to play. There's a lot of play modes also after the main story, as well as getting all the collectibles that definitely will give you quite a bit of hours to dump into this game. But now, it's time to move back onto the main story with one of the most influential video games ever made. Resident Evil 4. Genuinely, what the hell more can I say about this game? This title is heralded as one of the greatest video games ever made. To this day, it popularized the over-the-shoulder style gameplay specifically for horror that impacted Dead Space directly, or even games like The Last of Us. 4 is the Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time for Resident Evil. It took the formula that we knew and loved and completely revamped it to a whole new world. Leon stars in this title as he is sent to rural Spain to find the kidnapped daughter of the President of the United States. Ashley Graham, voiced by Sandy Cheeks and Maura Oral herself. Leon in this title is voiced by Paul Mercier, and probably considered by many fans to be the most iconic voice for Leon, right there with Matt Mercer. The gameplay is now with dynamic camera and prioritizes action with its over-the-shoulder combat, item pickup system with RNG ammo types and currency, and featuring the new inventory system, the item case where you'll be having your fair share of time playing Tetris. The currency brings in the Merchant, a mysterious stranger who you can buy and sell items to, such as treasures that you'll find throughout the maps of the game. Some are single pickups, while others are combinable treasures, maximizing your profits. This sure doesn't look like Resident Evil though, does it? Well, it still very much is. This is still a tank-controlled game. You have limited ammo, although you're definitely have an abundance of it at certain sections. Certain bosses or tighter areas may stretch you thin, however. This game uses adaptive difficulty, meaning that the better you play, the harder the game will be, and the more times you die, the easier it gets. That's actually a strategy you can utilize. You can kill yourself a bunch of times before a difficult section to make it easier if you want. Coming from Outbreak, there's melee attacks mixed with gunplay. This is definitely a lot more action-packed, chock full of kicking and flipping, lots and lots of backflipping, and loads of cheesy dialogue and quips.
No thanks, bro.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
My biggest issue with this game is its goddamn QTEs. Not just QTEs in gameplay, but during cutscenes too. Yeah, you want to take a sip of water during a cutscene? Fuck you, you aren't allowed to put the controller down. And if you mess up, you gotta start back at your last checkpoint. The most notorious is meeting with Krauser. I talked about this in my DMC video, but originally this title was going to be directed by Hideki Kamiya, who did Resident Evil 2. This project turned into a completely different game we now know as Devil May Cry. That's not the only scrapped version for this game. They technically have been developing RE4 since 1999, and there were multiple different versions before finally settling on what we got. After all of these ideas, it came clear to Mikami that the series needed to be reinvented, and Such decided to take the director's chair again. Although not everyone was for this approach, and many of the staff were actually depressed working on this game. I think that's a good demonstration of the fan base's response as well. The villains in this game are not zombies, but rather a religious cult infected with a parasite called Las Plagas. The villain is the cult leader, Sadler. Not a very unique villain with a simple plot. He's infected Ashley and intends for her to be a Trojan horse, if you will, for the parasite to spread in the US, specifically gaining control in the White House. Meaning that even after Leon saves her, he has to find a way to remove the parasite, as well as from himself as he too is injected with it. The Plagas make for more intelligent enemies, as now you're fighting a bunch of axe-throwing, scythe-wielding, crossbow-firing enemies, which also may explode and their parasites will attack you in different fashions. In a ballsy move, the first chapter starts off with a timed enemy survival section, where it immediately tests you by having you hold out until the bell tolls. Or you could just do this. This works. Leon runs into Luis Serra, who for some reason Leon can't pronounce correctly. Luis was involved in research for the Los Eliminados, but has since had a change of heart and wants to make things right. Although he doesn't actually do a lot in the original, he is one of the most memorable side characters, although his reception is rather murky, primarily in him being a stereotype, but let's be completely honest here. Every goddamn thing in this game is a stereotype. It's literally a bad Hollywood movie, and it even calls itself out for that.
The American prevailing is a cliche that only happens in your Hollywood movies.
Another issue was him sexualizing Ashley.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics too.
But again, the entire game does that. You can see her underwear 90% of her screen time, and in most versions of the game, she has jiggle physics. Ashley herself is a stereotype of how young women were viewed in the early 2000s, the Britney Spears era, if you will. Oh yeah, Ashley. Ashley is a source of PTSD for gamers. Another mechanic this game introduces is the escort system for protecting Ashley. You have commands you can use to tell her to sit back before you enter a dangerous area, or you can even send her to hide in dumpsters. She has famously been the most negatively received aspect of the original game. Many just see her simply as an annoying damsel in distress. And that is true, although in my recent playthrough, I honestly didn't struggle with her that much at all. Maybe because I'm familiar enough with the game, but yeah, she was just kind of chilling in the back and only got grabbed like once or twice. And she does have her own section, which she does well on her own. She can't fight, but not everyone on the planet can. Ada, on the other hand, is the fastest and most OP character in the game. The story is full of different bosses, each with their own gimmicks and weaknesses and goofy personas. A castle environment that takes up a good chunk of the game, and the island that I hate. The most odd is Krauser, because the game introduces this character like we're supposed to know who he is or we're supposed to care about him. And in the end, we still really don't. He's just a guy with a past connected to Leon that we don't really know about, and now he wants to help Umbrella because he got a bird wing?
Like you, I'm American.
The story ultimately results in removing the Plagas and Leon and Ada teaming up to kill the final boss. Ada steals the virus sample for Wesker, and Leon and Ashley escape on a jet ski section that is exactly the ending of Devil May Cry. Ashley then fails in offering sex to Leon, as that boy still got it bad for Ada. Upon completing the game, you unlock professional difficulty alongside new costumes for the characters. Leon has his iconic STARS uniform, and Ashley has whatever that is. There is also Assignment Ada, which is a mini-game kind of like Leech Hunter from RE0, where you play as Ada in this unique outfit, going around finding samples of the Plagas. Then of course, there's Mercenaries, which finally has taken shape here. You have a large assortment of characters you can choose from, go around killing enemies for points and stringing together combos to get even higher scores. Yeah, this is the Mercenaries that people love. Mikami famously said that he would rather have his head cut off than have RE4 be ported on other systems. Well, so yeah, RE4 is one of the most ported video games of all time, and I'm not going to sit here and break down all of them, especially the weirder ones, but I will discuss the major changes. The PS2 version is the inferior version. Since the PS2 is much less of a gaming powerhouse, they had to change the real-time cutscenes of the original to pre-rendered ones that look bad. And overall, this is just one of the weaker ports visually. The biggest thing we got was Separate Ways, which is another Ada game mode, except this is a canon one that actually shows us her side of the story. 5 chapters across the whole main story with Ada's perspective. She's got a grapple gun mechanic, and overall, she's much faster and more evasive, making it easier to avoid enemies in combat. The downside is, the cutscenes are also pre-rendered, and since that was developed for the PS2, all subsequent releases also feature pre-rendered cutscenes. Yikes. Beating Separate Ways also unlocks a new costume set, a cool gangster outfit for Leon, and a suit of armor for Ashley, making it to where enemies can't grab her. Lots of knocks to the visuals here, bad lighting, muffled audio, lack of physics, as was the first PC release by Ubisoft, which is basically the PS2 version. On the other hand, arguably the best console release. You can play with traditional controls or the redefined motion controls, which are so much fun. The aiming is changed for the Wii Remote, and honestly, it does make the game a lot easier depending how good you aim. The graphics were also enhanced, and this features all of the additions from the PS2 version without its negatives. The game has since been re-released in HD, all modeled after the Wii version. That includes the PS3 and 360 versions, which was also released again on PS4 and Xbox One. And lastly, the VR version. I love the VR version, although unfortunately the game was censored a bit in its cutscenes, most of which focus on Ashley. Watching the cutscenes in VR just sucks anyway. The gameplay is incredible otherwise. I switched to the MetaQuest just so I could get this game, and I love playing RE4 this way. And yeah, RE4 is still awesome. The next game, and its sequel I should say, are real oddities. The first is Umbrella Chronicles, originally released for the Wii. This is another attempt by Capcom to give us Resi in a completely new way. This is a rail shooter. Unlike the Survivor games where you still very much are in control of your character and their navigation, this is basically sit and point. And the game does all of the walking for you. Your only responsibility is killing the enemies on screen. Very much arcade style. This did release in HD on the PS3 alongside Code Veronica, and while it does look better, I prefer the Wii's gameplay with the Wii motion controller. If you have a PlayStation Move though, it might be more fun on the PS3. I don't have that, but I do got the Wii Zapper, baby, yeah! Now we're ready to whack some zombies. The story of the game covers the events of RE0 through RE3, sorta. The game is 2-player co-op, so most scenarios call for 2 characters, opening with Rebecca and Billy during the events of RE0. It is a heavily compressed retelling, as each scenario only has 3 missions. You'll see iconic locations and respective enemies. You can aim for critical hits as well as destroying damn near everything for weapon pickups or collectibles. Weapons have limited ammo outside your standard handgun, but you can upgrade them high enough to have infinite ammo. Basically, the entire game has a new cast for the iconic characters here. We do get our first performance of Wesker by DC Douglas, who is, yeah, the most memorable actor to portray the character. Although he still comes off a little bit corny here.
Zombies.
After RE0, we move on to RE1 Remake. It should be noted that this game uses the same visual style as the GameCube titles of Resi. So with RE0 and RE1, it's all familiar sights to us, just retold in first person. In RE1, there's no Barry, sadly. Chris and Jill's scenarios are combined to give us a more simplified perspective of the mansion incident. What I really like about this game is the added lore and extra chapters, such as seeing Rebecca and Richard trying to survive the mansion before Alpha's arrival, or Wesker's resurrection after RE1. That stuff is cool. There is this extra villain, Wesker's rival, Sergei Vladimir. He's another eccentric Umbrella villain. I was most excited to see RE3's scenario, to see how they would rebuild that title. Since this is focused on the Stars side, all of Leon and Claire's stuff is not in this game, but don't worry, they'll get their spotlight. RE3, however, was immensely disappointing. Jill? What the hell? Getting to see Carlos reimagined in this style was cool. Not really sure how I feel about that voice.
Hey, easy, Chica. I'm just a hired gun.
But that's really about it. It feels like most of the scenario was just assets from Outbreak. Yeah, that's basically what this is. The scenario even ends in RPD with the same version from Outbreak 2, and that's where you'll battle Nemesis for the first time and kill him. Seriously. Well, you do get this Ada chapter to see how she escaped the city. That's really cool. And yes, you can play hunks for Survivor. The game concludes with a new scenario. This is really neat, focused on Chris and Jill finally putting an end to Umbrella. Completely new cutscenes here. It's always nice to see more content of these two. These events happen in 2003 and do achieve the end of Umbrella. Umbrella Chronicles is immensely simple and immensely fun. Still, it was something new and refreshing for the series, and personally, it's one of my favorite Wii motion-controlled games. Even more so, its sequel, the Darkside Chronicles, this time covering the events of Leon and Claire. As you imagine, this also fills in some gaps between titles. This game focuses on Operation Javier, a mission featuring Leon and Krauser, now giving us a proper introduction of the character and his relation to Leon. After they battle some BOWs, Krauser asks Leon of his history to better understand what they're dealing with. That leads into a retelling of RE2. featuring Tobey Maguire as Claire Redfield. Now, since RE2 hasn't been remade yet, this was actually our first high-end retelling in a modern visual style for the game. The opening has Leon and Claire paired together rather than separating them like the original, reaching the police station in a faithful recreation of their path from RE2. I will say the story mode here is significantly lengthier than the first title, giving us 8 whole chapters covering the entire RE2 game. From the police station, Sherry, Ada, the sewers, the basement, the Umbrella Lab, Mr. X and Birkin bosses. Yeah, this kicks ass. The next scenario is Code Veronica, oddly enough considering that Leon wasn't there for that. Just like RE2, CV got a very faithful recreation, although the downside, or plus side for some people, is more Steve screen time, and he does not shut up in this one. They also made him more of a pervert?
There are 3. The guards had them. Only used them for games. Oh, and porn, too.
Umbrella probably doesn't know where he is either.
What did he do? Why are they after him?
I don't know. But he's been missing for 3 months.
Roger Craig Smith's first time voicing Chris Redfield.
Look, Claire, we can talk about this later, but we gotta get out of here first.
It is interesting that they tried to add a little extra lore to the relationship between Alexia and Alexander. Wesker's role, however, was very condensed in this, making the lead into 5 not nearly as dramatic. But you can pick and choose what you like more, the duel of fates, or the intense stare down teasing the inevitable battle between the two. Once the flashbacks were settled, we return to Leon and Krauser, which already is an impressively length original story on top of everything else in this game. Leon and Krauser team up with Javier's daughter who's been infected with the Veronica virus. America! Yeah! What in the Final Fantasy? Well, Krauser loses his arm fighting and becomes inspired by Manuela's ability. He is deemed unfit for further service, leading him to seek out Wesker. Well, see, now I've got a reason to care about this guy and his motives for RE4, which is the biggest takeaway from this title. Darkside is superior than Umbrella Chronicles with its gameplay enhancements as well as its narrative. Although there are some issues with it, the camera jerks away from the action way more, and they're trying to be dynamic, which can be really tedious when you just want to shoot some damn zombos. It's still a lot of fun though, and this one held my attention better than the first game. I can see what people kept asking for Operation Javier DLC as well. Unlikely that'll ever happen, but it was a nice lead-in to RE4. Now it's time for the next mainline title, Resident Evil 5. Boy, this game is also a mixed bag. It has been years since RE4 released, and with 5, it was a big deal. The hype around this was crazy. After all, RE4 was one of the best games ever made, and now, Resi was coming to Xbox for the first time, with a game having pretty heavy focus on online modes. This alone made RE5 one of the best selling in the series, and one of the most controversial. 5 basically threw away the survival horror aspect of the series. This is purely an action game. Unfortunately, it seemed like Resi was trying to compete with the other games at the time. It still echoes classic Resi, being a sort of tank-controlled game as well as its attachments to the lore, but this is where fans really started to feel the series lost its essence. I was just a kid when this game came out, but I remember my excitement. This was the first Resi for many players due to its Xbox release especially. Many have fond memories of its co-op, which was the highlight of the game. Playing this solo is boring. Very boring. The AI is actually kind of decent, more than people give it credit for. It's a gamble whether or not the AI is going to be useful for you. But if you're playing online with a friend, that makes for a much better experience. In fact, it is the definitive experience for this title.
Hurry! Come on! 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 Come on!
The story opens with Chris Redfield mourning the death of Jill Valentine. What? Jill gets killed in a flashback? Also, Jesus Christ, Chris, did you eat a fucking truck on the way here? Chris gets a new partner, Shiva, a character who, you guessed it, had a tragic backstory with Umbrella. You know what's really fucked up? On the original cover art for this game, it had Chris and Sheva as it should, but since then they've been putting Jill on the cover, even with the gold release. Sheva is the other main character. Why did they remove her from the cover? Well, Chris and Sheva have to work together to battle these enemies that share quite the similarities with Las Plagas from 4. This leads to an investigation of Trisil, which is basically this game's umbrella. You battle lots of different enemies from throughout the series, your basics, your parasites, your big critters. They even brought lickers back in this one. You also get some bosses here in the game, although they pretty much all are the same thing. Find the glowy part and shoot it. You could actually abuse the farming in this game, like really badly. The 3rd chapter can give yourself infinite supply of rocket launchers by grabbing them and quitting. That's all you have to do to get a rocket launcher. If you quit a mission, you still get to keep stuff in your inventory. It is absurdly busted. The levels are generally the same, but there are some unique ones like this gunner mission or this driving in the swamp one. Chris and Sheva eventually learn that Trisil, under Excella, a character the internet very much enjoys, is working with Wesker. Wesker has this Ouroboros plot to basically kill humanity, evolve it to something greater, whatever. This whole thing is going really hard with the terrorism scares of the 2000s.
Shit, Wesker. I thought he was dead.
How many times have you thought that by now, Chris? And this definitely won't be Jill, will it? Oh, look at that. So Wesker put a brainwashing tool on Jill's chest. And you know, it's lucky pulling that thing out didn't just kill her. That looks very deeply embedded. Wesker betrays Excella to no one's surprise, turning her into another simple boss. Wesker is the only really interesting one because bro got some crazy moves. You can shoot a rocket at him and he'll just catch it. Let me just, And there's the climactic battle. Chris versus Wesker on Mustafar. And I know what you're waiting for. I know what you want. And with that, Chris and Sheva kill Wesker, presumably for good as of now. And that's it. The story for this game is one of the least interesting, but it's also one of the worst written titles. For such a corny story, it tries to take itself more seriously and be darker, which only makes the dialogue feel uncomfortable. There's no cheesy charm like in RE4, or even with the original trilogy. It's just flat and undynamic. The voice actors themselves are great, especially Wesker, who gave us some iconic lines.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
But the dialogue has a certain fan fiction feeling to it, like it was written by a Resident Evil fan who was also 12 years old. And Resi is not a series known for riveting dialogue, so that just goes to show how rough it is in this one. Outside of the main story, there are loads of collectibles to get and extra game modes. You've got a kick-ass Mercenaries mode featuring loads of characters, even Excella if you want. Barry and Rebecca, with loads of maps and costumes. I think most of the game time could be found here. There's also additional stories as well, such as Lost in the Nightmare, which is an entire level based on the flashback at Spencer Estate where Jill died. It is really cool that we finally get to see Spencer in person as well. This level is neat because it tries to be a little bit more like classic Resident Evil. You got the mansion setting and even these door opening animations. And this one actually attempts to have puzzles for you. Remember when this game was about solving puzzles? Which brings me to the big problem. RE5 is just really boring. The biggest problem with this game is how linear it is. It's easy to just zone out and then bam, you're at the end of a level. The game doesn't really do much to stand out besides for its co-op nature, which even that doesn't compare to a different zombie game that released the same year. The game itself it's very flat. Even on its harder difficulties, it doesn't really challenge you that much. As a kid, I didn't care about internet reviews. I only saw the trailer and read magazine articles and let the hype fuel me. And then felt immense disappointment at the end of the game, and I can sympathize with those who enjoy this title. But for me personally, 5 is just mid. It's not a game I really care to return to, nor is it a story that I really care about. People wonder if this game should get a remake, but I'm not so sure. I didn't have a 3DS back in the day. I had a PS Vita, which was awesome on its own right, but I never got to experience the DS Resi titles. I did already talk about Deadly Silence in the first RE video, and Revelations we'll talk about in a bit. The Mercenaries 3D is the only 3DS exclusive title, and it is exactly as the title advertises. It is the Mercenaries game mode from RE4 and RE5 combined for an on-the-go experience. One of the best minigames ever is now available on the go. And yeah, that's basically what this is. You have a decent assortment of characters, no Sheva though, that's really messed up. You can play as Claire or Hunk. Yeah, you go around killing enemies and stringing combos. I mean, how many other games can you say you got to play as Rebecca fighting Los Illuminados with a bow? This game is awesome for how simple it is. I would have loved it back in the day, but not much to say about it now. But yeah, Mercenaries is a really fun, on-the-go Resi experience. Now it's time for Revelations. This is a spin-off title, but this game is canon, so it actually matters. Sorta. Revelations was originally developed for the 3DS, which I remember even back then being amazed by how it looked, and jealous that I couldn't get it because I didn't have a 3DS. Thankfully, the game was ported on, well, pretty much everything else, so now anyone can play it. The HD releases did meet with some criticisms for the graphics, which felt outdated by the time they hit consoles. I can't be too mad at it myself when I know that this is a port of a damn 3DS game. That actually makes me more in awe of it. The story puts us on another boat. You know, I never realized until making this video how reoccurring that is in this franchise. We start with Jill, now with a new face model that still weirdly kind of looks close enough to Julia Voth, but isn't. Joined with a new character, Parker, from the BSAA, as they search for Chris, who is missing. Continuing with the heavy terrorist themes, we see this nice, beautiful city in the Mediterranean get absolutely... Well, hold on. What the fuck is that haircut? Yeah, so city gets incinerated by solar beams. And then we spend some time with the BSAA gang, who is mostly voiced by Bleach anime dub voice actors. Rukia is Jill, Kenpachi is O'Brien, Parker is Baragon, Chris is Shinji, Roosterhead here is Grimjow, Jessica is also voiced by a Viz dub actor, Kadin in Naruto. I don't think she was in Bleach though. That's really wild. Did Viz just do the voice acting for this one? Jill and Parker investigate this ship where they are attacked by new blood-sucking BOWs and a very suspiciously detailed corpse. Surely that won't be important later. We spend some time with Chris and another new character, Jessica. What the hell is with the fashion in this game? Well, Jill's wetsuit certainly has become iconic with the internet for reasons. The game also puts heavy emphasis on the PKE scanner from Ghostbusters. You can scan hidden items, collectibles, and enemies. The title alternates between Chris and Jill's stories, eventually linking up together in an episodic manner.
We are Veltro, vengeful messengers from the depths of the Inferno.
Holy shit, the leader of the terrorists is Madara? Oh look, the corpse was important. Yeah, this Rachel BOW will keep popping up at you. You do get to play some of the other BSAA members as well throughout the story, which is probably the biggest highlight of this title, getting a better understanding of the BSAA and their relationships and their workings. It's not that well done, but it exists nonetheless, and at least the humor here and the character work is more interesting than 5. Chris is getting some practice in before punching boulders. Were those hunters playing Leapfrog? So, eternal politics and competition, whatever the plot of this game is nothing important. It's entirely skippable unless you want some extra lore for the BSAA. I do really appreciate this game for trying to go back to its horror roots. The opening of the title especially is incredibly tense and claustrophobic. In a sense, it sort of feels like a reimagining of Gaiden. Revelations is a neat title that I wouldn't say is required, but definitely worth checking out. Personally, I think the original 3DS or even the Wii U port are the most interesting releases of this game. And I do like this little ending here that leads into 5. The HD version added in this extra game mode called Raid Mode, which is what will make the trophy hunting an absolute bitch and a half for Plat Seekers. It is an insane grind, but its completion will certainly give you your money's worth in time. Now we move on to the second of 3 games released in 2012. This was another experimental title that didn't work for a lot of people. This title is a squad-based shooter in a non-canon story mode set during Raccoon's Outbreak. It feels very lazy, edgy, and low budget. You go into a game solo or online with a squad of 4 playing Umbrella Mercs alongside Hunk. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here. Just look at this. This game has the audacity to call itself Resident Evil, and it's not even a good shooter. Playing with friends? Sure, there could be some fun to be had. Even though the servers were shut down on Windows and you can't even get this game on Steam anymore, even Capcom doesn't want you to remember this title. If you want an unpolished shooter slathered in edgy 2000s grime, this is the game for you. You do get to see some important characters, hell, you can even kill Leon if you want, but nah, this game is mad boring. I rented this title when it came out and I haven't touched it since. Now I remember why. This game was quite panned on release and it didn't do well with critics and I guess not fans either because frankly, I rarely hear anyone say anything about this game positive or negative. It just sort of disappeared with time. And it really pisses me off because I love the concept of this game, I really do. I just wish that the execution wasn't so boring. 2012 was an amazing year for games, so it's no surprise that this one fell into obscurity. And it gets even better. Resident Evil 6. Say what you will about this title, it's better than the game we just played. The hype around Resi 6 was insane. I remember playing the demo over and over again, waiting in excited anticipation. The way this game was advertised made it feel like this was it. This was gonna be the last big one. You were getting Leon and Chris together in one game, no Jill or Claire sadly. You had the CGI movie serving as the prequel. You had the anthology release for PS3 players. This meant you got all of the mainline titles in a single collection. Xbox 360, however, got a copy of the CG movie as well as HD code Veronica, but it didn't have 1 and 3 because those weren't on the system. However, when 6 came out, people hated it. And actually, this might be the first time I soaked in a collective negative review of a game. But yes, there are fans of this game, and many who think it was overhated. Was that the case? Well, I haven't played it all the way through in over a decade, so let's check it out. There's a prologue chapter with Leon and the new character Helena in an apocalyptic setting. The intro is over the top, full of zombies and helicopter crashes. Stop letting this man drive things, please. You get a basic introduction of the controls, which are much more fast-paced than 5. I found the new aiming reticle to be absolute piss, so I switched to laser sights. I'm not a big fan of the UI in this game either. It's definitely more cinematic than any of the titles before it. Great sound design and visual direction. It's just that the gameplay isn't that great. The main story is broken into 4 campaigns, which interweave giving a non-linear narrative. This will be problematic. You can try to make it chronological, but you have to beat the game at least once to do so. So we're just going to go down the line, starting with Leon. Leon's story opens with having you put down a zombified president of the United States. Well, that doesn't bode well. Leon's campaign is more focused on the survival horror aspects, slow movements, hidden enemies, dark and spooky environments, limited ammo. Who needs ammo when you can just kick the shit out of everything? Stop letting this man drive! The zombies look awesome though, some gnarly designs here. Helena drags Leon into a church with annoying puzzles where we find a videotape of Ada and damn it, Japan. I am also not a big fan of Ada's design in this game. We then fight a BOW of Helen's sister full of jiggle physics. They're going really hard for that M rating in this title. Jiraiya returns as Simmons, the head of security who turns out to be the villain. The co-op here is a bit flawed. For instance, Helena will take care of some stuff for us, but I can't pick up the loot? At least Sheva could pick up the loot for us in 5. I killed the damn enemies with my sniper and I can't even get my points for it, thanks. Leon and Helena chase Simmons down to China, and that's what happens when you let Leon drive. Oh my god, it's Sherry! Fatherly instincts kick in. Matt Mercer and Troy Baker.
Friend of yours? Or like an ex-girlfriend? Guy doesn't know when to quit.
Oh look, an Ada in different clothes with a different attitude. Heh, that's totally not this oopy-goopy version from earlier, is it? Leon fights Chris because he's a simp. I love how casually Leon drops Jake's identity.
Robert Wesker's son.
I'm sorry, what? Did they really just need us to play the intro again? Doesn't that make the purpose of the prologue counterproductive? Turns out everything bad that ever happened was because of simping for Ada. Makes sense. And then the final boss turns into Mega Gyrus. Okay. Wow, so Leon's campaign took us as long to beat as the entirety of Resident Evil 5. And that was the first campaign. So Chris had a bad day and decided to drink away his problems. Wouldn't this be cool if this was Claire? Or Jill? Or Sheva? No offense to Piers, but I just don't give a shit about him. Chris's campaign isn't really that interesting either, sadly. Yeah, this really just turns into a bland shooter. Go from A to B, pew pew pew. Look at this. Well, now we know why Chris was all mopey. Miles Teller was killed by Clone Ada. I'll take it back. This game's amazing. Seems kind of irresponsible to put the guy with memory issues as captain, but that's your thing, guys. Do whatever you want with it. Yeah, Chris is kind of a dick in the first half of this game. You got your whole cliche PTSD soldier story, survivor's guilt full of sweat, testosterone, yelling, and grime. This is perfect for a 13-year-old. So Chris isn't going to question how Ada switched outfits between... whatever. This is Resident Evil, by the way.
Tell me, we just following orders? Or was it personal?
Both.
Okay, that was hard as hell. Bro thinks he's guts. Who didn't see that coming? And his hair's still standing, though. Wouldn't it suck if they just didn't find Chris and he died out in the sea? Well, with the first two campaigns, we're 10 hours into the game. That has already made this the longest Resident Evil game. Now for Jake. I'm gonna play Sherry, actually. Well, Sherry and Jake at least have some fun dynamics together. The hard-boiled merc with daddy issues, and Sherry, also with parental drama, I suppose. The story starts off with Chris's mission in Europe, which also means we have to do this again. Sherry turned into a real badass. The stealth sections in this game are not great. And, man, what's up with this game? The rest of the campaign is just seeing the other half of what we already know. We get a bike section, a tank, and some time on a boat, finally throwing Chungus in some lava, and a very anticlimactic ending. And the final campaign is for Ada. Ada's scenario is interesting. When the game dropped, originally, you had to unlock this after playing the first 3 stories. This was originally a single-player only story without co-op options, but Capcom made a free patch that added a very pointless agent. They have no importance to the story, but at least you can play with a friend. Ada's campaign is kind of neat. You get some spy-type missions going around, doing stuff on a sub, flying a helicopter. The most important of Ada's campaign is really getting some goddamn lore and why everything happened. And as I said before, it was all because of some simps. RE6 is generally considered the worst Resident Evil game, and that's just plain wrong. Operation Raccoon City is worse than this. And like it or not, this game does a good bit better than 5, especially in level design. The major problem with 6 is that it's too bloated. Being a long game isn't a problem in most cases, but it's certainly not something we're used to with Resident Evil. This felt like each chapter had a section or two it didn't need that just dragged the playtime. If you're encouraged to replay the game on higher difficulties with each character per scenario, why the fuck is it so long? That's discouraging. To say that they didn't try is immature. They tried too hard. This game was perhaps too ambitious. The non-linear narrative does not work here. It makes certain reveals underwhelming, and it doesn't work like they wanted it to, especially for going with such a cinematic approach here. I do think the game is a bit overhated, but to be fair, it had a very, very bad launch. This game, when it dropped, was a buggy mess. Certain sections were almost unplayable, and the PC version is still very much the same. I tried playing online with a buddy of mine, and it was a disaster. The remastered version is, well, the best experience I've ever had with this game. I didn't have any game-breaking bugs this time, and it looked and performed pretty good. There's also loads of extra game modes and collectibles. I don't care, I'm ready to move on. Resident Evil 6 may have a lot of flaws, but there's one thing you can't say. You can't say that it's short on content. Well, it took a few years, but in early 2015 we finally got a new Resi game. Revelations 2, sequel to the spin-off game from 2012. Although the concept was not to have it be a direct sequel. Revelations was meant to be a series of stories bridging gaps between mainline titles. For instance, this game places you between 5 and 6. The title stars Claire Redfield for the first time, not voiced by Allison Court, and most definitely looking like Tobey Maguire now. Claire is part of a new organization called TerraSave.
Terra save. Because tear doesn't have to end with a wrist.
Oh boy. Alongside the daughter of Barry Burton, Moira, enjoying a nice little party, and then they're kidnapped into a prison on an island, full of monsters driven to insanity from torture, being led by a mysterious woman, the Overseer. Now they did something a little unique with this one. It was told in episodes which were actually released like DLC in the form of a Telltale game. That said, this game feels a bit shorter than the first. The game is certainly much prettier than the previous, more so than I actually expected. And this one has co-op as well, meaning that there are 2 characters per scenario. With Claire, you also have Moira, who isn't much of a fighter, but she's got a crowbar and a flashlight. Claire's story is in the past, while Barry is in the present searching for his missing daughter. Barry gets his own sidekick, Natalia, a girl with mysterious abilities, including being able to detect monsters. As I was playing Barry, I realized, oh yeah, this is post The Last of Us. And I'm not just saying that because of how Barry looks, or the whole Natalia thing, but the way that the game feels. Yeah, the influence is definitely there. It does feel a little less like Resident Evil and more like, well, you know. The episodic nature also gives off some Walking Dead vibes, or just Telltale in general, which also really blew up prior to this game's release. They don't share so much in gameplay, but more so in the episodic structure in its release. As for the story itself, I'm indifferent. I don't know how I feel about Claire. I get that she's older and more grizzled now, but come on. You're seriously telling me the woman who saved Sherry couldn't be nice and calm for Natalia? Really? And Moira still acts like an angsty teen even though she's much too old to be doing so. When she was a kid, she was playing with one of Barry's mini guns in the house and shot her sister. And then she held a grudge over Barry because he lashed out at her. The TerraSave characters, or whatever, they simply exist to die and to turn into bosses for us to fight. The Overseer injected all of them with the virus that responds to fear. The boss, played by Yuri Lowenthal, is so obviously a traitor, you can smell it in the first goddamn cutscene. And during our time with Barry, we fight some invisible bugs and find this creepy shrine, only to learn that the Overseer is Alex Wesker.
So, Claire? Why would the boss come here?
I don't know. Neil just does things sometimes.
You see, that's my exact problem with how Claire is written in this game. Neil turns out to be a boss to no one's surprise, and we kill him, or Moira does, depending on your choice, and then we go after Alex, who has an interesting plan. Not just that, they want to take over Natalia's body, but she experienced fear when she blasted her brains out, turning her into a monster. Moira and Claire get separated, and turns out Claire actually did make it back, and that's how Barry learned about the island. Barry and Natalia track down Alex Wesker into this, yet another Spencer-type mansion, where they have a big old boss battle. Why is she speaking corn? Depending on your choice earlier with Neil determines your ending of the game. It's actually been a while since we've had alternate endings, huh? Well, I got the good ending on my first try. Moira shows up and pew-pews, and then Claire shows up and pew-pews, and then Barry says this.
Let me take care of this.
He said the thing! And then everyone lived happily ever after.
Yeah, well, tell Piers to look after him.
Oh, so Claire sent Piers after Chris. Well, thanks for clearing that up, actually. Oh. Are we ever gonna get a follow-up on that? After the main game, there's loads of unlockables, such as costumes and weapons. Huh. There's also 2 bonus episodes, one that shows how Moira survived between the time skip, and one for Natalia. There's also the return of raid mode, which is a lot more detailed and involved this time, and still the biggest grind. There's fun DLC characters to choose from as well, such as Wesker. I would say that Revelations 2 is better than its predecessor, not just because it's a bigger project, but the story and characters were a bit more investing. Mainly in that we haven't seen Claire in forever, and Moira was a nice addition for bringing Barry back into the fold. I just wish we had more reason to care about the villains though. Neil kinda gave us one, but Alex just existed for the plot really. Regardless, Revelations 2 is a really neat entry and did pretty solid with critics and fans, so it gave the franchise some hope after 6, until the next entry. Umbrella Corps. Shit. Yet another experiment from Capcom. This is a multiplayer competitive shooter. In 2016? Yeah, like this had a chance against Overwatch. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This game blows, and literally everyone agrees. This is perhaps the most negatively received Resident Evil game out there. And undoubtedly, it is the worst game. It is. It's not just a bland shooter, miles worse than Operation Raccoon City. This is genuinely a pathetic Call of Duty clone. It feels rude to Call of Duty to even say that. This isn't anywhere near the realm of fun like COD Zombies, I'll tell you that. It was a dead-on-arrival game, but weirdly enough, servers are still open for this one. I mean, I couldn't find a game myself. I could only play some solo, and it was shit. The fact that this game has Resident Evil attached to it is insulting. Umbrella Corps definitely made things look iffy for Resi. It had been about 5 years since the last mainline release. Fans were wondering when Resi would make a big comeback. Then we enter 2017. It seemed that Capcom was aware of what Resident Evil was missing. Horror. Yeah, like Resident Evil would go back and make another scary game. Now we're talking. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard may be controversial for old-time fans like me, although I personally enjoy this one greatly. 7 was the first step in bringing Resident Evil back, the first entry in this modern era of Resi. A new story, new characters, a new setting, and in first person. Definitely a step up from Survivor. The first-person perspective is the most controversial change. Many didn't like this too much. Me personally, I play video games, so I didn't mind. Many would carelessly compare this to Outlast. That's fucking stupid. They are two completely different games. RE7 is actual survival horror, not like Outlast where you just run and hide. The only thing they share in common is the perspective, and, well, horror. Kicking in hard with the RE engine. This is Capcom's big winner, that they use for all their hard hitters now, like DMC5 or even Street Fighter 6. I adore this engine, not so much for DMC, but Resi, it's a perfect balance of realism and still bearing its own visual style. And the RE engine on PC brought some very interesting mods, and this is only the beginning of the modding scene for these games. Whereas people were pissed because there was no Leon, Chris, or Jill, I was excited to see a new fresh take on the universe for Resi. That is what this franchise desperately needed. We have a new protagonist, Ethan Winters, whose face we do not see in order to give more immersion to the player. Ethan goes to Louisiana in search for his missing wife who disappeared on a babysitting job. Huh, well, this is just what I see outside every day. While the gameplay may be in first person, it's still very much in tune with classic Resident Evil. Item management, item box, limited saves on harder difficulties, weapons, puzzles, exploration of a spooky location. That's right, for the first time in however many years now, we actually have another evil in a residence. I can't believe it either. Inside the home, you find the VHS tape of the shitty Ghost Hunters show. Definitely gets more than what they bargained for. This is a reoccurrence in the game, finding VHS tapes that show clues on how to solve puzzles by learning from others' mistakes. These scripted events in the early game, however, are the reason that I don't really speedrun or learn to master this game, really. Hell, you can't even skip cutscenes in this game. Ethan finds Mia only for her to not be quite the same as he remembered. And then we open to Ethan's many instances of abuse, such as getting his hand cut off with a chainsaw. And let me tell you, it won't be the last time. Hey, kill Mia a couple times before Jack gives you a warm welcome.
Welcome to the family, son.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then the game really starts after this dinner sequence. Now you're on your own, left to explore the baker's home while fending for yourself. Right out the gate you have Jack, which reinvents the stalker enemy trope that all future modern Resi games will utilize. You know, the big enemy that's gonna chase you around randomly, although it's still kinda scripted. You'll meet the weirdest cop of all time before battling Jack on many occasions. We also run into one of the deadliest evils for residences, Mold. The molded are okay. They kind of suck as enemies as they aren't super threatening, but they can give some good scares here and there. Going outside to the bug house where we battle Marguerite, most disgusting of the villains. Ugh. And her weak spot is also, well, that's just inappropriate, Capcom. There's also the pyromaniac's son, Lucas. He looks like the type of person you'd run into at the gas station. Lucas does have this rather fun escape room section, which can end a bit toasty if you aren't careful. And he kinda just runs off, and we don't see him again in the main game. The daughter Zoe cooks up a cure, but only 2 shots. Ethan is forced to use one on the final boss with Jack, giving you a choice that will kinda sorta determine the ending of the game. I mean, he did come here to save his wife, after all. Don't worry about Zoe, she'll have some DLC. We then switch to characters in classic Resi fashion. We have this Mia section, on a boat. I hate this part of the game. There's a whole lot of circling around, irritating level design. This section exists for audiences to learn more about the antagonist of the game, Mia. I mean, Evie. Yeah, Evie. Evie is a human bioweapon that was created by The Connection, a bioweapon manufacturer that Mia secretly worked for. Yeah, villain. Needless to say, things didn't go well, and all Evie wanted was a family. Ethan defeats Evelyn.
Use it! Back to formula.
And is saved by Chris? He looks, different. Well, I'm glad to see the BSAA is still around to... don't worry about that. That's Blue Umbrella. You know, blue is the color for the good guys, right? After the main campaign, you unlock Madhouse, which is the title's professional mode. And kind of a range mode too, as it contains different enemy and item placements, as well as improved enemy AI. Much more threatening. Then there's loads of DLC game modes, including banned footage, which will give you some extra insight on what Evie and the Bakers were up to in those 3 years. This includes a visual novel dating sim with Marguerite. Ugh. There's also Not a Hero, where you can play Chris Redfield as he hunts down Lucas. End of Zoe's a big one, which shows how Zoe survived after Ethan saved Mia, featuring Uncle Joe, who is an absolute unit. And then you got Ethan Must Die, nice DMC reference, which is essentially the Merc mode of this game. While the main story is rather short, there's quite a lot of great DLC that really expand the narrative, and in my opinion, this is how you make good DLC. Anyway, RE7 does kick ass. It's not my favorite Resident Evil, but damn, is it a wild ride every time I revisit it, and I understand why this is a favorite for a lot of people. We can thank this game for being the real kickstart and bringing Resident Evil back into the mainstream appeal. As popular as the title was, it still didn't quite hit the numbers that Capcom wanted. It seemed more people were interested in watching rather than actually getting it themselves. Hell, a lot of people actually thought that this game was too scary to play. Okay, come on now. It's not nearly that scary, but hey, to each their own, I guess. And this won't be the end of Ethan's journey, but we've got some years before RE8 drops. 2019 was an awesome year. After a decade of waiting, we finally got DMC5 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. It only took them 17 years for that one. The hype for this, when it was announced, was immeasurable, even more than RE7. RE2 is one of the greatest games ever made, and it was being reinvented for the modern era. Okay, there was some anxiety. Quite a bit, actually. But that was alleviated when the game dropped. I'm not entirely sure what it was, maybe all the streamers, but this was the game that really hit everyone. This served as a modern introductory title for new fans. It seemed like everyone was playing this particular game. And why shouldn't they? It kicked ass. Now, as time has gone by, the more I reflect on the game, I don't think it's perfect. But I do think it's one of the most fun Resident Evil titles out there to play. Complete reimagining. The gameplay is in a more modern, over-the-shoulder style and third person, unlike 7. But the item pickup still works similarly to classic Resi. Limited item space, item pickups, ammo, herbs, puzzle solving, key items. I love the inventory UI here. This actually might be my favorite out of all of the games. It's so easy to maneuver, to remove items and organize. You can choose between Leon and Claire like the original with A and B scenarios, meaning that there are 4 scenarios in total. The differences between them are actually minimal, unlike RE2 OG, which has a canon run and is still the canon run for the standard timeline. It actually doesn't matter what you choose here on Remake, however, because the end result will still be the same. Well, I'll still do Claire A, Leon B. We get a more cinematic recreation of the game's opening, which originally was a lengthy cutscene, but now we get some more gameplay early on. Usually it's the other way around. I actually really enjoy the gas station edition. It gives you a chance to familiarize yourself with the controls before throwing you right into the mayhem. The first zombie here also kind of reminds me of the OG zombie in RE1. Leon and Claire are completely remodeled for the new engine, and new faces and new voices, and I'm fond of both. After the two are separated, we get a brief run into the city before reaching the iconic police station. It may look different, but it still feels like home. And then the game starts to go its own way here, giving us new objectives like saving this cop in the West Wing. I love the gore. It definitely looks much more spooky here. It's darker, it's tighter, making for more tense interactions with the zombies. And kudos to this game for returning to the classic zombies. No superpowers here, no tentacle monsters, parasites, not just the good old zombos. They're pretty tanky though, and they can take a whole lot of shots in the head before they finally go down. That's why I got popped in their kneecaps. And look, they finally got a bathroom in this place. The quality of the acting in this title is the best it's ever been in the series, even with the traditional clunky writing. And now we have to open the secret escape route from the station in the middle of the main hall, kinda like Outbreak 2. This is where you can finally go and explore the station. You can find all of your familiar sights with new puzzles. Lots of switcheroos here, like the liquor hallway no longer being the first encounter. Well, not in A scenario, at least. It isn't until escaping through the statue passageway that Claire finally meets little Sherry, as well as Papa Birkin. Hey Willie, the first Willie boss can be a real pain in the ass if you aren't prepared. On higher frame rates you could just tear through his ass with a knife, but console strats take a little bit more finesse. After saving Sherry, she is immediately taken by Irons, who is absolutely deplorable in this game. He was always a bad person, but my god, do you want to smash his face in with a steel pipe Silent Hill style on this scumbag. This leads into Police Station 2, getting some cleanup, as well as going into Iron's office, and of course, Mr. X. Look, they even give him a little hat this time. Mr. X took the Jack Baker formula and brought it to a whole new anxiety-inducing level. Mr. X is the stalker enemy of this game and has a bad habit of popping up when you least expect. He does have an indicator, his heavy-ass footsteps, and his music. First time players may find this to be a nightmare, but after you get to know the guy, he's not so bad. We get a Sherry section that isn't really much, and we learn about this orphanage where kids were being experimented on, and it's rather horrific actually. Bringing us to the sewers, which, yeah, is still the worst part of the game. Well, the G-mutants are certainly more of an issue in this title, and Sherry does get infected regardless of the scenario. The game concludes at the lab, which has also been quite reworked. Doesn't feel as much as backtracking as there actually is area to explore. You brew the vaccine for Sherry and then battle Willie. Annette dies for the first time, won't be the last, and then the final battle with Willie again. Get the train going and link up with Leon. Unfortunately, my biggest issue with this game is the B scenario. While the beginning is different, it's still the same game, basically, with slight item rearrangement. Doesn't really line up with the timeline that well either, nor do the choices of A scenario really affect anything. So what, Mr. X put this helicopter back down and set it on fire just for the opposite character? Ultimately, all 4 scenarios aren't vastly different. There are notable scenario-specific events and different weapons per character, but yeah, that's pretty much it. While this is pretty disappointing, the game itself is still very fun. The critical differences in Leon's story, of course, is Ada. Ada is no longer disguised as a civvy looking for her boyfriend, but rather pretends to be an FBI agent this time. And Ada's new model certainly ushered in a new era of simping. Ada's section is much more evolved in this game. You get some spy gadgets, which is pretty cool. Ada overall is a lot more interesting of a character, at least in her writing, although I still adore her original performance in the OG. Kendo was something else that they greatly improved. Instead of being a weird, creepy guy, he actually is a sympathetic character. You still battle the same bosses in all scenarios, including Birkin, But Leon gets a final boss with Mr. X at the end, which is a very, very jukeable boss with grenades. And like the original, B Scenario gets a full ending, including the train Birkin and seeing the gang escape. There's quite a bit of unlockables and DLC available. Alternate costumes, including ones based off the original character designs. You can literally play the PS1 models. I also like that they included Ezra Walker, the original prototype of Claire Redfield. My favorite DLC is the original music pack, which not only uses the original OSTs of the '98 game, but the sound effects too. There's extra game modes including, yes, Ford Survivor with Hunk, very similar to the original, and other Rush survival modes that are not canon. Oh no, there's a lot of hours to put into this, even with a game that already has 4 scenarios. Side note, I find it disappointing that this is the only modern Resi to get a physical deluxe edition. I love this release with its alternate cover and all the DLC available. Now they just do digital deluxe editions or gold editions that come out after the game's initial release date. That's lame. Deluxe editions on launch rule. So yeah, I can't call this a perfect game, although many do consider it so. This is undeniably a great release and a great introduction to newcomers, but I still like the original better, and the next game is a lot less of a debate. Resident Evil 3 Remake. I remember playing this game at midnight when it released. Hell, I streamed my first playthrough at midnight, and I couldn't believe how quick this game was. And yes, Resident Evil games are short. I've been saying that forever, even on first playthroughs. But RE3 is the longest of the original trilogy because it doesn't have alternate scenarios, it's just one main game. Yeah, this game is problematic for most fans. I think I myself was in denial over it for quite a while. There are cool things in this game, but there's a lot of negatives as well. The opening is a live action sequence that I'm indifferent about, whereas the original started with Jill's apartment blowing up. We get a little bit more insight on what was going on with Jill post RE1, seeing her PTSD and fears of infection as well as her suspension from stars. Jill, of course, has been completely recasted and remodeled as all the characters have been in RE Engine. And I do like the new face and performance. A lot of fans were mad because they put Jill in pants instead of her tube dress. Yeah, God forbid they put Jill in something efficient for this scenario, but you know, whatever. You do get DLC costumes with the original designs, which I personally think highlights why Carlos looks so much better in the new style. Ugh. Jill is attacked by Trashbag Nemesis right at the start of the game, absolutely obliterating her apartment. The sequence is awesome the first time you play it. It becomes very tedious on replays, as do all of the abundant scripted sequences in this title. The gameplay is very similar to RE2 Remake, although there are some changes. The enemies are much more tanky and their AI is more threatening. But we are getting more of that shift into action here like the original. Jill, of course, is a seasoned character over Leon and Claire after all. There's a dodge button now, like the original, that definitely takes some practice to use. We get an on-foot perspective of the fall of Raccoon, which feels much more small scale. Brad at least is more useful here, and a character you can actually feel bad for instead of just being a whiny bitch. He actually sacrifices himself for Jill. Carlos is also actually a character in this game and not just a shit ass. There's chemistry between these two now, and Carlos's lines aren't just cringe-inducing. Well, for the most part. I hate Nemesis nose. They even let Mikhail be a character this time. That's crazy.
Get off my train, shit Sparta!
After the scripted opening sequence, the game begins with the goal of getting the train running like the original, which brings us to Raccoon City. A much smaller and less of a labyrinth of a map. Nemesis will persist, and his AI is interesting. Obviously, the higher difficulties, the more of a threat he is. Todd Haberkorn is killed by Nikolai, who is still very obviously the villain of this title. I don't want to talk about this. This whole Nest section sucks. Then Nemi finally pops up. Like the original, you knock him down and you can loot some goodies from him. After getting the train going, Nemi chases Jill into the sewers, a rather short and redundant section, leading to our first boss fight with the flamethrower Nemesis, bringing Jill to Kendo to further those ties with RE2 Remake. Nemi then attacks the train, killing everyone except Jill. There is an RPD section in here like the original, but this was moved to Carlos this time, who's hunting down a scientist for Umbrella alongside Tyrell, who in the original was just a guy that was killed by Nikolai, but now he has a narrative purpose. This is where we see Zombie Brad speak words and bite Marvin. Not nearly as cool as his canonical event from Outbreak 2. The RPD section is more involved than the original, but it's still pretty short. You do get to see how some of Carlos's actions affect the station for RE2. This is Clock Tower, by the way. Yep, this is it. People generally find that to be one of the biggest issues with Remake was cutting out Clock Tower. And yeah, it sucks. Clock Tower is one of the most iconic sections of the original game, and here we get a lame boss fight with Dog Nimmy. Jill's infected, leading to the hospital section, bringing back hunters. They look awesome in the RE engine. And Carlos? Bro, you punched a hunter and sent it flying back. Crazy how fast they no longer wanted these games to be scary. The final act goes into the underground lab, which is significantly smaller this time, and a boss battle with Dog Nimmy again. A very uninteresting boss battle. Then the big old laser cannon, except this time you actually have to do it yourself. There's a final confrontation with Nikolai, and Carlos flies them away. No Barry? That's bullshit. And the game is over as quickly as you started it. The biggest problem with RE3 Remake isn't just the cut content. It's the simple fact that this game is just walking a straight line to the end. It is so insanely linear that it really does not take long to beat even on a first playthrough, and they knew that this game was short and they played on that. They incorporated the shop with the new game plus items you can unlock to make the many difficulties easier if you choose to use them. All in all, the higher difficulties aren't that tough, although the final boss on Inferno did have me pulling out some hairs. I don't think RE3 Remake is a bad game, especially not compared to the ones we've seen that are actually bad. But this game was a major disappointment, and yeah, I think it's the worst of the remakes, which can be a downer for fans when RE3 OG tends to be a favorite for many. I do like the character work they did, the narrative overall was improved, but there was no branching choices, smaller sections and maps, simplistic designs and puzzles. There wasn't much challenge, outside of a single zombie needing a whole mag to take it down. RE3 Remake is a great cinematic experience, but it's lacking in the gameplay department. Now, since the developers knew that this was such a short game, they essentially gave players a free game to go along with it. Resident Evil Resistance, which was an online game that was being developed at the same time, and they decided it should just be a bonus for RE3. Resistance is no longer getting support and has been delisted by Capcom. Not that that really matters too much because this game didn't have too many fans either. Although it was certainly more fun than Umbrella Corps. I think we all know by now that these multiplayer games just don't pan out, especially the competitive ones. It was criminally unbalanced and just not a great game. You play with a team of 4 characters featuring original survivors against a mastermind who are familiar villains of the franchise. The mastermind must defeat the survivors by controlling the environment and setting up enemies. The survivor side is kind of like a bad version of Outbreak. The game didn't even have dedicated servers, meaning that the mastermind would often be the host, and that wasn't great either. Lots and lots of hackers in this game. There's not really much to say about it other than, yeah, it was something that existed. Well, it was about time to take a break from remakes, although fans were still thirsty for Code Veronica. It was time for a new mainline title, Resident Evil 8 Village. I really felt the hype on this one, and I haven't really revisited this one that often, nor have I actually played the DLC yet. So that'll be the last new thing for me. The DLC did bring one major game changer. Since this was an Ethan Winters story continuing from RE7, this was also originally in first person. The DLC actually brought in a third-person perspective for the main story. I never tried it before, and I gave it a shot, and I actually do prefer the game in first person. That's what it was developed in mind for, and I prefer it that way. In one of the most interesting openings, the story begins with an animated storybook sequence for the Village of Shadows, a folklore tale which foreshadows the events of the game. This is actually a really beautifully animated sequence. Several years post RE7, Ethan and Mia have been placed under protection in Eastern Europe by the BSAA. During this time, Ethan and Mia had a daughter, Rosemary. These cartoons are for Ethan, by the way, not Rose. Although Mia shows strange changes in her character before Chris.
No!
See, Chris, why can't we just talk things out? Well, the character model kinda looks like his old self. The main plot of this title is Ethan trying to save Rose, but finds himself in a folktale nightmare. A return to European horror, but a little bit more than just aesthetic this time. As a Universal horror fan, I absolutely adore this. The environment, the old village, the spooky superstitions, the Victorian style, yeah. I really love this. There's quite a bit of similarities with 4 here as well. The creepy village is one thing, but the return of the Tetris inventory, the balance of action and horror, the merchant, collecting treasures and currency, hell, even both games open with a siege survival section. I should note that the biggest upgrade is that Ethan is not just a blank canvas here. Now he actually has personality and a lot more dialogue and even some zingers to deliver. And Ethan's hand abuse continues. The standard enemies of this game are lycans. They are werewolf, molded critters that make for some threatening opponents. They're agile and vary in methods of attack, from melee strikes to flaming arrows. And then you got the chungus ones. Getting more lore from the few remaining villagers, the name Miranda comes up quite a bit. The next major area is Castle Dimitrescu, where we get kidnapped by the great value Dante, Heisenberg. I really do love the back and forths that Breaking Bad and Resident Evil have with each other.
Hey, I just realized DC and Damien aren't talking about Breaking Bad for once.
Hey, don't go there, Chris.
Yo, that shit's ahead of its time.
It's a goddamn masterpiece.
Dimitrescu is a major reason a lot of people wanted to play this game. The internet lost their mind over Big Mommy Vampire, and Capcom was fully aware of it. There was so much advertising on her alone, I didn't even know about the other Lord villains. For the record, the vampire daughters are much better than Lady D. And more Ethan hand abuse. Now, some people would find this situation scary. You know what, let me just stop myself now. So a good chunk of the game is spent in the castle solving puzzles while looking for Rose, only to learn that she isn't there. In order to escape, Ethan has to battle all of the daughters and survive Demi, who is the game's stalker enemy. Ethan learns that the Bug Girls can be defeated by sunlight, and gets his hand cut off again. I'm glad herb juice can just solve that issue. This genuinely breaks my heart. After battling and killing Dimitrescu, we find Rose, or a piece of her. Yeah, it turns out we have to find the rest of her and put her back together, like a Lego. The next section is Donna's creepy place. This is less action and more puzzle solving. Your weapons are literally stripped from you, and you've got this creepy doll to take apart to get clues. What in the fucking Silent Hill? Yeah, that shit ain't right. That is by far the creepiest fucking thing we've had to go up against in this entire franchise. Next target is Moreau, a disgusting slime-spitting frog. This cutscene is genuinely very funny.
I'll just be taking this.
After all the pieces are collected, we get some ominous umbrella shenanigans going on. And then we arrive at Twin Peaks. This factory sucks ass. The part most of us dread on replays. Chris finally clears the air about what happened. Mia wasn't actually Mia, but Miranda in disguise. I don't know how I feel about Jeff's performance of Chris. He's just doing the same voice he did with Carlos, which worked for Carlos. The final boss with Heisenberg isn't the greatest. Most of it's just holding the trigger, aiming for the glowy parts. It's only on Village of Shadows where this boss can actually be a challenge. I appreciate the boulder punching reference. Leading into a brief Chris section, which is just Pew Pew chapter. We learn that Spencer knew Miranda and had trained under her, and that's where he got the idea for the logo for Umbrella. So Miranda's daughter was killed during the Great Influenza epidemic, and in her attempt to kill herself, she discovered the mold. And yeah, and all this crazy stuff happened just so she can bring back Ava. And then we get a major plot twist. So Jack actually killed Ethan when he stomped on his skull, but the mold kept him going, giving him incredible regenerative powers. Ethan has a final showdown with Miranda and dies. Yeah, an RE protagonist canonically dies at the end of a game. Damn. Ethan Winters is one badass dad. Ethan didn't even get a trilogy, and it seems that this was the end of the molded arc, as it looks like 9 is going in a new direction. And we get another weird twist. The BSAA are using bioweapon soldiers? Rosemary's story isn't quite over yet though. We get a glimpse to the future as she's grown up, now working for the government. We can assume that she's got some crazy superpowers, bringing us to the DLC, which as I said, this was my first time playing. Shadows of Rose is part of the Winters expansion pack. This is a small sized campaign putting you in the shoes of Rose Winters as she tries to go inside of the mold in order to remove her powers due to her suffering excessive bullying and a desire to be normal. This brings us to familiar maps of the game with limited ammo against rather simple but annoying enemies. You will explore and find key items and unlock Rose's true abilities. All the while, she's assisted by a guardian spirit, who speaks exclusively through text. I can't wait to find out that this is Ethan. The connection between Ethan and Rose here actually works really well and is very impactful. Anywho, some bosses and creepy dolls until meeting Evie. Then we battle Miranda, who tricked Rose into the mold hive thingy. Ethan makes a brief appearance to help. Rose decides to own up to her responsibilities rather than her desire to be normal. The boss is a little tricky, you gotta absorb Miranda's attacks to use Rose's own abilities. Eventually, we end up in the Eclipse. Dear God. Yeah, this went anime real fast. The most important thing about this was Rose meeting Ethan. This DLC can hit you right in the emotions. And then the post-credit scene from the main game plays again, leaving me to wonder what could be next for Rose. After those campaigns, there's Mercenaries and loads of challenges for you to unlock. I actually really do like Village. There's something about it that doesn't really drive me to return to it very often, nor do I find it as replayable as other Resi titles, but I still find it to be a fun game, and I think I do like it just a tad bit more than 7. It just has more character to it. It's still kind of a serious and gritty game, but it leads into those eccentric villains and characters. There's still that corniness there. It's a good balance, I think, in this title. Except for Chris. I don't like how they handled Chris in this game. Now, even though RE8 was a lengthy title, they supplied us with another online game to go with it, just like RE3 Remake. Reverse. This game is actually unplayable. And I don't mean that it's bad, well, it was, but literally they shut this one down. You can't get past the main menu. Reverse is an anomaly. I don't know what Capcom's fixation is on PvP Resi titles because it just never works. But it doesn't really matter because this is gone. This is off the face of the earth. You can look at the trailer, but that's pretty much it. It's just another bad online PvP that is gone forever now. Now we're at the most recent game to release. Resident Evil 4 Remake. When this was announced, I wasn't that excited. 4? Seriously? That was the next game? Code Veronica deserved a remake more, and it was next in the story after all. And the OG 4 is still a good game available on all modern systems. But 4 was the choice because why? Because it's popular, and popular sells. Turns out, this game's actually kind of awesome. I'll admit, this game became something of a comfort for me during my last years at university. Something I could really just dump those few free hours I had. I didn't know I played it that long, to be completely honest with you. God. Well, I haven't played this one in a minute, so let's hop back in.
September 30th, 1998. It's a day I'll never forget. The cop inside me died that day.
They did it! Remake gives us more insight on what Leon went through between games, more than the original, but still not a lot. No Operation Javier or anything like that. The opening is incredibly faithful to the original game, but extended to be a little more cinematic. Leon's model has been changed up a little bit, and I definitely think that this is the look. They nailed it here. Whoops. The movement in this game is the best of the RE Engine titles. I don't care what anyone says, it's just factual. Leon is faster, sure, but the clunkiness and rubber banding is pretty much removed here. It feels so good to just run in a circle. Oh wow, Leon actually speaking to the villagers in Spanish. I love the little additions like that. This title does lead more into a serious and darker approach than the original, trying to go more into the horror aspect, which fans of the cheese will be greatly disappointed. But those who prefer spookier Resident Evil will not be. Hunnigan also got a great remodel. The survival siege section is a lot more tricky in this one, but we are introduced to some of the new mechanics. Most importantly, knife play, in particular, has been reworked dramatically. You can use the knife for parries on enemy attacks, giving you openings or even surviving the chainsaw's one-hit kills. Hey look, another strat where the enemies can't get you. The game in general will feel incredibly familiar, but there's lots of little changes spread throughout the title, like finding Luis. The game plays on your expectations of finding him in the cabinet or closet, but nah, it's just this guy banging on the floor with an axe. Oh, and the QTEs have been toned down, thank God. Overall, the game is pretty damn close to the original in narrative. It just feels more expanded, and even when little stuff was cut or scenes and events were rearranged for better story flow, the game overall feels bigger. You go into all these recognizable locations, but there's so much more expanded. Expanding the missions for the merchant, leading to more treasure hunting and extra mini bosses, more backtracking when you get Ashley to get said treasures, extra bits of lore on the village or even Luis. Luis this time is actually a character. I think that's generally what's agreed on, even with people that don't like this particular game, is that the character work was very well done, especially with Luis and Ashley, who are much less stereotypes in this title. Luis doesn't die as early, he actually sticks around the story and helps out, especially in the mines section, which in the original game was not the most stimulating section, turns into a fun on-rails game. Luis's death is also much more tragic since we care for him more in this game, and he actually opens these moral dilemmas faced with the aftermath of Umbrella. Leon initially has nothing but disdain for Umbrella for obvious reasons, but Luis brings in the question of redemption for these scientists. Luis's death also introduced Krauser, who still really isn't much in this game. I do think Krauser is utilized a bit better in the original, but Remake does add some more dialogue with him and Leon teasing their history. I don't know, Krauser is just a character that's hard to care about when he just kind of shows up and dies. He was memorable for his goofy lines in the original, but in here he's just an obstacle to get through. Ashley is just improved in every aspect imaginable. For one, she isn't screaming Leon help in your ears the entire game. She actually gets progressively more useful as the title goes along, showing the character develop as she faces more hardships and challenges in the story. The AI does seem to be a lot less problematic later down the line. But in the first chapter with her, oh boy, that's rough. She feels like an actual person now, and her interactions with Leon are actually kinda cute. All in all, the writers did a damn good job making you actually want to save Ashley in this game, versus the original where she was a character you had to save. The memorable villains are still here, even the goofy Ramon, and they aren't really changed that drastically. They still serve the same purposes, and their characteristics are pretty much the same, maybe just a little less corny this time around. Sadler doesn't make a full appearance till near the end of the game, and they definitely went full religious cult leader crazy with him. He actually comes off as a sinister villain this time rather than just a bland, corny boss. Boss fights are cheesable, and there actually used to be a lot of crazy glitches when the game first released, that you could skip a lot of these sections. Depending on how you use your weapons from the merchant, what you buy, and how you upgrade them, you can make boss fights pretty easy. Of course, harder difficulties will require more skill, which reminds me, in case you're wondering, no, this isn't a mod. The cat ears are what you unlock for beating the professional difficulty with S+ ranking. It basically gives you infinite ammo on all weapons. This game incorporated a whole cosmetic with bonuses gimmick. This is the latest game, and I know a lot of people talked about it and still are talking about it, so I won't spend too much time here, but I really did like this title. I didn't think I would as much as I did. And people do debate on it, not everyone was fond of the gameplay on this one, which I find strange, because to me, it is so much more refined and so much more fluid than the previous RE Engine titles. I find it insanely addicting, actually, because of how good the combat feels and the general movement. I was really surprised to see criticisms pointed out there, but I guess it just doesn't work for everyone. After dumping 400 hours into RE2 Remake, RE4 Remake just felt natural and superior in many regards. And I am more in favor of the serious, darker tone for this story now that I've actually witnessed it. And I do love the campiness of the originals, and the good news is, they aren't going anywhere. They're still getting modern support, and they're still the canon ones, so. Quite a bit of DLC for this game as well, cosmetics obviously, and there's Mercenaries was released as free DLC, more of a patch really, at some point after the main game, as well as the VR mode. Then there were Separate Ways. Astonishingly, people that didn't even like the main game like this one, which leads me into talking about Ada as well. And I guess, yes, the face card here is Yeah, you know damn well I don't even have to say it. The new voice actress is Lily Gao, who actually played Ada briefly in the Welcome to Raccoon City movie, which failed and will not be getting a sequel, thank God. But at least Lily got to play the character again here. Separate Ways, much like the original game, is an extra campaign where you play as Ada Wong and see her side of the story, watching from her perspective. They definitely added some extra steps to her spy gadgets, given her Batman abilities now. Ada's DLC is an excellent companion piece that truly does feel like the other half of the story. Getting so much more with Luis is great, and Wesker. I was shocked to actually see Wesker make an appearance in the main game, but the amount of Wesker in the DLC is crazy. And it does end on a cool lead-in to RE5. Ada's story also brings in stuff that was originally in Leon's campaign in the OG game that didn't make it in the cut. If you were mad that these iconic scenes weren't in the main game, here they are. Ada's story is pretty quick too, making this to be a rather fun one for speedrunning. Not much need for combat here, although it is really fun with that grapnel of hers. I'm a little indifferent on how heavy they went with treating Leon like a dog, but it's nice to see Ada's perspective and her mixed feelings on that golden retriever. It seems he too is a part of her that she can't forget, and the direction they took her at the ending was really great. If you're getting RE4 Remake, get the gold edition. Separate Ways is not just worth it, it's a necessity for the story. And that's it. That is, as of now, every Resident Evil game out there, with RE9 coming out in February. Whew, I'm not gonna lie, this took a lot longer than I was expecting. I thought I was gonna knock this out in a month, and it ended up taking about 2. I would say that this journey was rewarding. While I have played many of these games before, some not at all, and some not for a while, it was really fascinating to see the progression of the franchise from start to where it is today. To see what they experimented with and what worked and what didn't. And even with those setbacks, the franchise still went strong. After 30 years with nearly 30-ish games. That's not even counting the collaborations and mobile stuff. I feel pride as a fan to say that I've played every single Resident Evil game, good or bad. And from a preservation standpoint, it's really nice to see that these games are still getting modern supports. The spin-offs tend to get neglected in that department, unfortunately, though. It'd be cool to see Outbreak get some kind of modern release before 9 drops. I am immensely excited for the next entry in the series, although I'm going to need a bit of a resi break before that comes out. But I'm caught up, so I'm good to go. I've only watched a couple trailers for the new game. I haven't seen any of the latest stuff because I kind of want to go in the dark with this one. I'll be playing this one at midnight, and I want it all to be a surprise to me. Which of these games was your favorite, and which were your least favorites? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to share any great nostalgic memories you have with these games, the good ones or the bad ones. Sometimes those memories can make a bad game feel good. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and be sure to check out my socials to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.